Chapter 81, Night Skies of Bravus. Walking along the red-carpeted aisle, we finally saw the Sea King, Regal Antarion, sitting on the throne. Aquaman raised his eyes slightly, his gaze fell on Gavin, and then prepared to stand up to greet him. At this time, the blood dragon guard behind Gavin brought the faceless man up and threw him heavily to the ground. Gavin spoke first, and said in a serious tone, "Your Highness, Sea King, I am very sorry to disturb you so late at night, but I just wonder what do you think about this matter?" The Sea King immediately apologized and said sincerely, "Sir Gawain, you are my guest, and such a dangerous thing happened in Bravus. It is really my serious negligence. I would like to express my deepest apologies. As long as you stay in Bravus, I will do my best to ensure your safety." After hearing this, Gavin didn't say anything, but walked to the side of the faceless man. Seeing that Gavin did not answer, the Sea King hurriedly said, "Sir Gavin, I promise you that I will never let such a thing happen again while I am in Bravus. I will also compensate you accordingly tomorrow." Then, the Sea King looked at Daenerys beside him and said gently, "Princess Daenerys, I will also compensate you for your brother's matter tomorrow." Gavin hurriedly thanked him, "Thank you for your thoughtful consideration, Your Highness." Then he asked with a puzzled look on his face, "Your Highness, Sea King, could you tell me who hired the faceless man?" The Sea King said helplessly, "Sir Gawain, although I can control the House of Black and White to not attack you while in Bravus, I am sorry that I cannot ask about the specific situation of the employer." Gavin frowned and asked, "Your Highness, the Sea King means that as long as I can ensure that I will not be assassinated by the faceless men during my stay in Bravus, the faceless men will still come to me once I leave, right?" The Sea King looked very apologetic, but he just sighed and explained, "The House of Black and White must also abide by the laws of Bravus. As long as they are in Bravus, I have the right to stop them from harming my guests, but I have no right to interfere with them. Bravus respects the beliefs of all gods. This is the foundation on which Bravus was built. But if it is outside of Bravus, I can do nothing." Taran Rayan explained to Gavin, "Once a faceless man accepts a mission, he will complete it. If the assassination fails, another faceless man will be sent out until the mission is completed." Gavin pondered for a moment and said, "It seems that this trouble is really not small." The Sea King said solemnly, "Sir Gawain, during your stay in Bravus, I will send more people to protect your safety, and you don't need to worry about the faceless man." Gavin nodded slightly, "Thank you, Your Majesty, Poseidon, but you don't have to bother me." Then he pointed at the faceless man on the ground, and a blazing tongue of fire instantly spurted out of his hand. The faceless man's screams were heard. The sound was shrill and desperate, echoing in the empty hall. A moment later, the faceless man turned into ashes. Aquaman and Tyrone Rayan were shocked by Gavin's tricks and their eyes widened in disbelief. The water dancers in the Aquaman Palace also nervously drew their weapons and pointed them at Gavin, becoming alert. After killing the faceless man, Gavin ignored the water dancers who drew their swords in the Sea King's palace, but took Daenerys' hand and said to the Sea King, "Sorry to disturb your rest, Your Highness." Aquaman was about to say something, "Sir Gavin." Gavin just bowed and turned to lead Daenerys away. When they reached the square in front of the Sea King's palace, Gavin ordered the Blood Dragon Guard to return to the Bel Aris immediately, and then released the Blazing Shadow. The Blazing Shadow quickly rushed out from the flames in the air. It sensed Gavin's killing intent and roared excitedly. Gavin took Daenerys and climbed onto the back of the Blazing Shadow. The Blazing Shadow kicked its hind legs hard, and its huge body instantly bounced up and rushed straight into the night sky. Its broad wings flapped vigorously, and a whistling wind arose. His muscles were taut and his shining scales gleamed in the moonlight, showing off his agile figure. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the vast night, leaving only a ray of light. In the air, Daenerys asked in Gavin's arms, "Gavin, what are you going to do?" Hearing Daenerys' question, Gavin said calmly, "Of course I will use the Dragon King's method and return blood and fire to the other party. If there is no need, I don't want to provoke the Faceless Men, a group of assassins who are extremely good at disguise. But now that I have provoked them, there is no reason to be on guard all the time." Even as they were talking, Jia Ying had already flown to the port and landed on the deck of the Bel Aris. The Blood Dragon guards and soldiers who stayed behind quickly came to greet them. Gavin put Daenerys down behind the dragon and said, "Bravus is a little unsafe right now. Wait for me on the boat. I'll pick you up later." Daenerys wanted to say something, but was afraid that Gavin would be distracted, so she just nodded and said, "Gavin, Be safe. Gavin smiled at her, patted Jiaying lightly, and ordered, Jiaying, lift off. The blazing shadow spread its huge and powerful wings, and a strong air current swept around it instantly. It squatted slightly, tightened its leg muscles, and then suddenly jumped up. The huge wings flapped hard, bringing up a strong wind, and the sails were blown by the rustling sound. The blazing shadow flew into the sky and rushed into the night sky of Bravus. Looking down from the night sky, Bravus below is bustling with activity. Colorful lights interweave together, illuminating the streets and alleys. Crowds of people are bustling, and laughter echoes in every corner. Celebration fireworks rise one after another, blooming gorgeous flowers in the sky. The ships in the port are brightly lit, reflecting the light of the city, forming a magnificent picture. In the palace of Neptune, Neptune looked in the direction where Gavin left, without saying a word for a long time. Tyrone Rayan said, Your Highness, Sir Gavin has such mysterious means besides dragons. Will he take action against the House of Black and White? The Sea King spoke slowly, I hope he won't, as long as he doesn't cause too much trouble to Bravus. I don't want to provoke him, but I am also worried. I hope he won't be impulsive. Taran Rayan nodded and said, Your Highness, should we strengthen our defences? The Sea King pondered for a moment and said, Well, immediately strengthen the vigilance. If Gavin does anything radical, send a fleet to block the canyon entrance. The other side also has a lot of soldiers. Send soldiers to block the dock to prevent Gavin's soldiers from entering the city. Gavin rode blazing shadow and circled in the night sky of Bravus, the whistling wind whistled in his ears, blowing his clothes. Gavin looked down, observing the terrain with sharp eyes, and soon locked onto the Isle of the Gods. After confirming the direction, Gavin gently pulled the reins, and blazing shadow immediately understood and flew towards the Isle of the Gods. Chapter 82. Blood and Fire. As the altitude continued to drop, the Isle of the Gods below gradually became clearer. At this time, the people of Bravus who were attending the Moon Song Festival on the Isle of the Gods also saw the giant dragon rushing towards them, and screams rose one after another. Some people collapsed to the ground in fear, some fled in panic, and some stared blankly at the sky, their faces full of fear and despair. Gavin found the black and white courtyard at this time, and with a strong murderous look in his eyes, he immediately pulled the reins lightly. Jiaying, sensing his master's intention, instantly understood, folded his wings, and swooped towards the black and white courtyard like a flash of lightning. The blazing shadow rushed down towards the black and white courtyard like a blazing flame. When it approached the dark grey stone temple, it began to hover, then opened its huge dragon mouth and a stream of blazing flames gushed out. The dragon flames hit the pointed black tile roof of the black and white courtyard like a raging dragon. The high temperature instantly turned the black tiles red, and the powerful impact shattered the black tiles. The flames flowed along the broken roof like a flood that broke through a dam and rushed into the temple. Inside the temple, 30 statues of various shapes stood along the wall. The red candles that were originally swaying at their feet were instantly engulfed in the sea of fire. The statues were tall and menacing, but now they looked somewhat hideous under the raging flames. The flames licked the statues, and the cloth decorations on their bodies quickly burned up. The fire spread along the statues, as if to completely devour these mysterious beings. The 10-foot diameter pool in the center of the temple was boiling violently under the high temperature, and steam was rising. The originally quiet main room was now turned into a purgatory, with flames raging and thick smoke billowing. The flames not only poured into the main room, but also flowed along the winding passage to the monks' dormitories. The monks' dormitories were instantly engulfed by flames, and their beds and clothes instantly caught fire. The panicked monks ran and shouted desperately in the sea of fire, and their screams were endless. The flames licked their bodies mercilessly, their skin was quickly scorched, and their hair and eyebrows turned to ashes in an instant. Some people tried to put out the flames with quilts, but it was in vain, and they could only fall down in extreme pain. The flames continued to spread, flowing into the countless caves dug in the temple. The objects in the caves turned into ashes in an instant, and the people hiding in them were surrounded by the rolling heat waves and struggled in pain. They desperately crawled deeper into the caves, hoping to find a glimmer of life, but the ruthless flames chased them relentlessly, devouring their hopes bit by bit. The blazing shadow continued to spit out dragon flames in the air. Gavin rode on its back and stared closely at the black and white courtyard below. At this moment, he saw that the carved wooden door seemed to have opened a crack. The blazing shadow immediately landed in front of it and forcefully sprayed even hotter dragon flames at the wooden door. Under the scorching dragon flames, the wooden door quickly turned black. The originally delicate carvings began to blur, and the wood on the door began to crack. Then, the fire spread from the door to the entire door. After a while, the entire wooden door was completely burned, and the raging fire completely engulfed it. The acolytes who were about to open the door and escape encountered this sudden disaster. They were enveloped by the fierce flames before they even had time to scream. The high temperature instantly invaded their bodies, and their clothes and hair burned almost instantly. Their skin was burned and cracked black. They struggled and twisted in pain in the sea of fire, but they could not escape the ruthless flames. The flames continued to surge forward along the corridor inside the temple, spreading further into the depths. Wherever they went, whether it was the walls, the ground, or other objects, they were corroded by the high temperature and flames. The rooms hidden deep inside were not spared either, and the people and objects inside were caught up in this terrible disaster. The entire black and white courtyard was engulfed in a sea of fire. Its former solemnity and mystery were completely destroyed, leaving only blazing flames and billowing smoke, as if telling of the catastrophe that had befallen this place. At this time, the people who were still on the island of the gods witnessed the dragon attacking the house of black and white with their own eyes. Their expressions were so shocked that they seemed to be frozen. They stared with their eyes wide open and their mouths opened wide, but they could not make a sound. They could not believe what was happening before their eyes. Fear spread quickly among the crowd like a plague, and the originally happy and peaceful island of the gods fell into extreme chaos. People pushed and squeezed, trying to escape from this terrible place. The crying of children and the shouting of adults intertwined, forming a noisy noise. Some people were trampled under the feet of the madly fleeing crowd, groaning in pain. Some lost their direction and ran around like headless flies, others stood there stupidly, so frightened by the scene before them that they lost the ability to move. Some brave soldiers tried to maintain order, shouting and waving their weapons, trying to guide people to evacuate in an orderly manner. But in the face of the overwhelming panic, their efforts seemed so insignificant. The women hugged their children tightly, their faces full of tears and fear, and they ran away from the house of black and white regardless of everything. The merchants did not bother to pack up their goods, hoping only to save their lives. The entire island of gods seemed to have turned into a hell on earth with great chaos. The roar of the evil dragon and the raging fire burning in the house of black and white became the most terrifying background sound in this disaster. As the dragon flames continued to burst out from the door of the black and white courtyard, the powerful impact and high temperature made the entire black and white courtyard building shaky. The stones on the wall began to loosen, and large pieces of stone fell from time to time, hitting the ground with a dull sound. The originally solid stone beams also became fragile under the high temperature, making heart-wrenching creaking sounds, as if they would break at any time. Some decorative stone carvings on the building began to melt, and the originally exquisite lines became blurred and distorted, dripping with hot liquid. The carved wooden door had long since been reduced to a pile of burning ashes under the continuous attack of the dragon's flames. The fire spread along the door frame, devouring everything that could burn. The statues in the house gradually collapsed in the heat, turning into piles of burning rubble. The stone slabs on the ground were also burned red and even began to crack, as if the earth was groaning in pain under this terrifying force. Thick smoke billowed up from the black and white courtyard, rising straight into the sky, dyeing the surrounding sky dark. The roar of the raging fire and the roar of the collapsing buildings intertwined together, as if it was the desperate wail of the black and white courtyard. At this time, the chaos on the Isle of the Gods reached its peak. People fled in panic, trampling on each other, and the screams and cries were deafening. Some people knelt on the ground in despair, praying to God for help, while others fell into madness and rushed to the sea desperately, trying to escape from this terrible place by boat. Chapter 83. Strange Black Shadow. At this time, in the depths of the black and white courtyard, there seemed to be some mysterious power struggling to support it, so that the black and white courtyard did not completely collapse under the violent ravages of the dragon flame. At first, the mysterious power was still struggling against the dragon flame, but as time went on, it was obviously unable to withstand the surging heat and began to shrink rapidly. As the mysterious force shrank, the originally shaky black and white house could no longer hold up, and the entire building began to collapse. The walls collapsed, raising dust all over the sky, the roof fell heavily, making a deafening noise. This once majestic and mysterious building, now turned into ruins under the attack of dragon flame. However, the dragon flames ejected by blazing shadow did not stop, and continued to gush into the ruins. The blazing flames raged in the ruins, turning everything that had not yet been burned into ashes. At this moment, a shadow-like energy suddenly rushed out from the ruins. This energy was dark and strange, as if it carried endless resentment and anger. The dragon flame of blazing shadow immediately sprayed towards it, and the shadow circled and twisted in the air, trying to break through the encirclement of the dragon flame. Gavin rode on blazing shadow's back, drew the sword from his waist, and locked his eyes on the black shadow with vigilance. The black shadow had obviously also noticed Gavin on its back, and quickly bypassed dragon flame and blazing shadow in the air, rushing towards Gavin. Gavin instantly activated the flame blade, and the long sword burned with intense flames. He chopped towards the black shadow fiercely, splitting the black shadow in half. After the two black shadows passed Gavin, they merged into one again, but its size became smaller. The shadow obviously realized that Gavin was not easy to deal with and started to try to escape. Gavin immediately chased after it with blazing shadow. The shadow floated into the sky, as if trying to hide in the night, but Gavin locked onto it and chased it all the way. As Gavin and the shadow left, the people on the entire island of gods fell into a complex emotion. Those who witnessed the dragon's attack on the Black and White House felt grateful for surviving the disaster. Some of them had weak legs and sat on the ground, gasping for breath, as if they wanted to spit out all the air they had been holding back because of fear. Some hugged each other and cried, tears of joy flowing freely. Others had dull eyes, as if they had not yet recovered from the thrilling scene. In the crowd, an old man trembled and clasped his hands together, mumbling to himself, thanking the gods for their favor. Several young people talked about the thrilling scene just now, their voices still trembling. Women hugged their children tightly and kissed their foreheads, thanking that the family was safe. The originally lively Moon Chant festival turned into a peacefulness after chaos. While people were thankful, they were also confused and uncertain about the future. But no matter what, they were still alive at this moment, which was the greatest luck. Gavin chased the black shadow all the way, the blazing shadow flapped its huge wings, and the wind whistled in his ears. The speed of the black shadow gradually slowed down. Gavin saw the opportunity and swung out the flame blade again. The powerful flame formed a flame wave that made the black shadow nowhere to escape. Under the scorching heat, the black shadow suddenly dived towards the sea surface, sank directly into the water, and disappeared without a trace in an instant. Gavin frowned and ordered the Jia Ying to hover over the sea, carefully looking for the trace of the black shadow. Jia Ying's altitude gradually decreased, and just as they were concentrating on searching, several tentacles formed by seawater suddenly rushed out from under the sea surface, and fiercely whipped towards Jia Ying. Jia Ying reacted quickly, and immediately spit out a mouthful of dragon flame, and the hot flame instantly evaporated the tentacles formed by seawater into water vapor. Just when Gavin was relieved, countless tentacles emerged from the seawater in all directions, sweeping towards the low-flying Jia Ying like a group of dancing snakes. Gavin's face was stern, and he shouted loudly, "Jia Ying, get up!" Jia Ying flapped its huge wings and flew upwards, successfully avoiding these menacing tentacles. Gavin, who avoided the attack, commanded Jia Ying to hover in the sky far away from the sea with a solemn look, staring at the turbulent sea water below, his eyes full of deep fear. Suddenly, countless tentacles emerged from the sea. Those tentacles seemed to be able to cleverly use the power of the sea surface to stand up on the sea, gradually revealing an extremely huge body, a hideous and terrifying monster covered with tentacles, which was disgusting to look at. Countless black shadows were surging in the body of the monster made of seawater like ghosts. Gavin's heart trembled violently. Obviously, the mysterious black shadow used seawater as material to create such a huge body for itself. In an instant, this huge and terrifying tentacle monster suddenly leaped up with the force of thunder and rushed towards the blazing shadow in the air with an overwhelming momentum. Without hesitation, Jia Ying spurted out a ball of blazing dragon flames. The high temperature instantly evaporated a large amount of seawater, making a terrifying hissing sound, and billowing steam filled the air like smoke and fog. However, the opponent's body was too huge, and the dragon flames ejected by Jia Ying seemed extremely small in comparison. Even though the scorching dragon flames evaporated a large amount of seawater, there were still countless strong and powerful tentacles like giant pythons that wrapped around him. Those tentacles made of seawater tightly bound Jia Ying's body, and even Gavin on the dragon's back could not escape the fierce attack of the tentacles. Gavin waved his flaming sword to resist desperately, but suddenly, a cold and slippery tentacle quickly wrapped around his ankle like a poisonous snake, and an irresistible force suddenly pulled him off the dragon's back. Gavin fell rapidly into the water involuntarily. At this critical moment, he looked up at the sky with despair in his heart, and saw that Jia Ying had been tightly entangled by layers of tentacles and had completely lost the ability to fly. He was like a bird trapped in an impenetrable giant net. Although he struggled desperately, he still couldn't stop falling. Gavin immediately shouted, "Jia Ying bathes in fire." Upon hearing the order, thick flames instantly burst out of Jia Ying's body. The tentacles that were originally wrapped around its body were burned by the sudden high temperature and made a sizzling sound. Some tentacles even loosened their restraints. However, the monster did not retreat. Instead, it tightened its other tentacles even more frantically, trying to suppress Jia Ying again. But as Jia Ying's flesh and blood gradually turned into flames, the powerful heat almost evaporated the entire monster. Soon, Jia Ying regained control of the air and recovered his ability to move. Gavin was still falling rapidly at this time. Seeing Jia Ying break free from his restraints, he finally felt much more at ease. Chapter 84. Confrontation at the port. At this moment, Gavin saw the dark shadow in the sea water in the air rushing towards him who was still falling. Then, the shadow and Gavin fell into the sea. In the water, the shadow quickly formed a human shape, and its hands tightly grasped Gavin's neck. Gavin fell into the water and couldn't breathe, his lungs felt like they were about to explode. Fortunately, the sword in his hand had not been dropped at this time. Even though he was in the water, he still tried his best to use the flame blade to pierce his body, and the flaming sword began to burn the black shadow madly. The black shadow gradually revealed a strange face without facial features, and the body burned by flames was twisted wildly, but he still pinched Gavin. "You owe me a life, Gavin Bellaris." As a resentful voice entered Gavin's heart, the black shadow could no longer resist the scorching flames and began to gradually dissipate. Gavin finally broke free and swam towards the surface. The moment he emerged from the water, he gasped for air, as if he wanted to suck all the air into his lungs. The blazing shadow spread its broad and powerful wings and whistled down. Its hind claws accurately grabbed Gavin, who was lying limp in the sea water, and then flapped its wings and flew towards the Bellaris. Gavin lay weakly in Jia Ying's claws, the sea breeze blowing across his wet body, but his eyes were still fixed on the sea that had just experienced a life and death struggle, his thoughts churning. Is this black shadow the thousand-faced god, or a part of the thousand-faced god's will and power? He thought about it and thought, if it was a god, it was too weak to be destroyed by me. But if it was just a part of the will and power of the thousand-faced god, I'm afraid there will be big trouble in the future. Thinking of this, Gavin's expression became more solemn. Are there any temples of the thousand-faced god in other places besides Bravus? I must find out when I get back. I will destroy as many as I can. Since I have already offended them, I will offend them thoroughly. Soon, the blazing shadow landed on the deck of the Bellaris. Daenerys had been waiting there anxiously, and when she saw Gavin in the blazing shadow's claws, she rushed over desperately. "Gavin!" Daenerys' voice was full of worry and concern. Gavin forced a smile, his voice a little hoarse, "I'm fine, don't worry, everything is going well." Daenerys looked at his wet and miserable appearance, tears welling up in her eyes. "How can you be okay, you are like this?" Gavin patted Daenerys' hand gently and comforted her, "It's really okay, I just need to change clothes, wait for me here for a while." After saying that, he walked towards the cabin. Daenerys looked at his back, worried. At this time, in the palace of the Sea King Rhaego Antarion received the news that the House of Black and White was burned down by Gavin the dragon. His face flushed instantly, his eyes widened, and his anger burned like a raging fire. He clenched his fists, his whole body trembling slightly with rage, and he gritted his teeth and roared, "This is Bravus, how dare he let the dragon run wild here? This is an insult to me and a great provocation to the majesty of Bravus." The entire Sea King's palace was silent as the Sea King roared. The Sea King was so angry that his face flushed, his chest heaving violently, and he looked at Tyrone Ryan beside him and roared, "Send the fleet to block the canyon entrance immediately, don't let them escape, and send soldiers to seal all the docks for me." "Yes, Your Highness." Terran Radian took the order and left. With the departure of Terran Radian, Aquaman gradually calmed down. He paced back and forth in the hall, his brows furrowed into a deep frown. The Sea King kept weighing the pros and cons in his mind. It would be easy to leave Gavin's fleet in the harbour, but Gavin had a dragon after all. If he rode away on the dragon, he would definitely take revenge on Bravus in the future. The Dragon King's anger might plunge the entire city into disaster. Could Bravus withstand it? But if Gavin is not dealt with now, the dignity of Bravus will be destroyed. This city was built by people who chose to flee because they were worried about being enslaved by the Dragon King. Now another Dragon King is wreaking havoc here with his dragon. If he does not respond, his position as the king of the sea will be in jeopardy. Aquaman felt torn as possible consequences raced through his mind. Suddenly, the Sea King stopped, took a deep breath, looked anxiously at the chief water dancer beside him, and asked in a low and urgent voice, "If Gavin comes here, can you kill him before he summons the dragon?" The water dancer was embarrassed, with beads of sweat oozing from his forehead. He replied in a trembling voice, "Your Highness, Gavin's method of spraying fire just now is beyond my understanding. I dare not guarantee that I can do it." The Sea King nodded helplessly, his expression still solemn. He sighed and said, "Forget it, don't take any risks. Send someone to inform Taron Ryan that he can only besiege and not attack without my order. Also, ask him to invite Gavin to the Sea King's palace." After changing his clothes, Gavin walked onto the deck with steady steps. Daenerys rushed forward, the worry in her eyes not completely gone. Gavin gently held her in his arms and said gently, "Don't be afraid, I won't let you get hurt." At this moment, the captain came hurriedly, looking nervous and reporting in a hurried voice, "My lord, the situation is not good. We seem to be surrounded by the Sea King's fleet. The port is also terribly quiet, without any ordinary sounds. I sent people to observe and found that all the important roads are guarded by soldiers. The canyon leaving the port has been tightly blocked by Bravu's warships. Our way out is blocked. My lord, should we set sail to break out by force?" Gavin narrowed his eyes slightly, looked in the direction of the port, and after thinking for a moment, he said, "Don't be anxious yet. Since the other party has already made arrangements, it may not be possible to break out by force at this time. Immediately order the soldiers to strengthen their vigilance and the fleet to be ready to fight at any time. I think the Sea King will not dare to take action. Let's wait and see what they will do next." As the night deepened, the sea breeze blew gently, and both sides waited quietly for a long time, as if time had frozen. Just when everyone's nerves were stretched to the limit, a ship slowly approached the Bel Aris docked at the port. The person who got off the carriage was Taron Ryan, who was sent by the Sea King. He boarded the Bel Aris and said respectfully, "Sir Gavin, His Majesty the Sea King invites you to visit the Sea King's palace." Gavin looked at Taron Ryan sharply, and after a moment he said, "Go back and tell Aquaman that I will go there tomorrow morning." Taron Ryan bowed slightly, then drove away without saying a word. Chapter 85, The Sea King's Invitation. Gavin stood on the deck, lost in thought. Daenerys walked over to him and whispered, "Gavin, could this be a trap?" Gavin held her hand and comforted her, "Don't worry too much. Even if it is a trap, I have a way to deal with it." At this time, Gavin was already exhausted after a night of fighting, and there was very little magic power left in his body. Even Jiaying was so tired that he lay on the bow and fell asleep. Choosing to meet tomorrow morning was a helpless move. That night, everyone on the Bel Aris had trouble falling asleep. The moonlight shone on the sea, making the waves sparkle, but it could not dispel the haze that shrouded people's hearts. Outside the port, the Sea King's warships were still tightly blocked at the mouth of the canyon, with no signs of evacuation. The soldiers of Bravus on the dock were still standing firm, motionless, like silent statues. The morning sun shone on the Bel Aris. Gavin walked out of the cabin and saw Jiaying, who was full of energy. He was completely relieved. However, he was still a little worried that Aquaman would do something desperate. Thinking of this, Gavin ordered Jiaying to let the fire possess his body. Then he turned back to the cabin, and Daenerys immediately came up to him and said with a worried look on her face, "Gavin, are you really going? This is too dangerous." Gavin gently put his arm around her shoulders and comforted her, "Don't worry, dear. Since the Sea King has invited us, if I don't go, it would make us look cowardly. Besides, Blazing Shadow has recovered, and I am prepared for any situation." Daenerys bit her lip, her worry still lingering, "I'll go with you." Gavin interrupted her and said with a smile, "Don't worry, even if there is an accident, I can get away at any time with Jiaying. Besides, since the other party invited me, it is very likely that he does not intend to take action." Daenerys knew she couldn't change Gavin's decision, so she could only nod and say, "Then you must be careful." Gavin responded and walked off the boat with only 2 blood dragon guards. When Gavin stepped onto the dock, the soldiers suddenly became nervous and unconsciously tightened their weapons. However, none of them dared to act rashly and silently made way for Gavin. Gavin was calm and walked straight towards the direction of the Sea King's palace. Gavin once again stepped into the Sea King's palace. Looking at the gloomy-looking Liege Antalion sitting on the throne, he bowed slightly and said, "Your Highness, Sea King, thank you for your invitation." The Sea King sat on the throne and snorted heavily, "Gain Belaris, I invited you to be my guest. But you let your dragons wreak havoc in Bravus and burnt down the House of Black and White." Gavin stood up, looked at the Sea King calmly, and responded, "Your Highness, I have always abided by my duties in Bravus. However, as a guest, I was assassinated in Bravus, and you could not guarantee my safety. Naturally, I had to fight back." Aquaman frowned and raised his voice, saying, "I have already promised to compensate you and guarantee your safety here." Gavin nodded and said, "I appreciate your kindness, His Majesty. But I want to know, after I leave Bravus, I will be assassinated by the Faceless Men again. What should I do? You cannot guarantee that the House of Black and White will give up the assassination. I can only solve the problem myself. As long as the problem is not solved, what happened last night will happen sooner or later." The Sea King was speechless for a moment, then he argued, "The Black and White House." Gavin interrupted him and said firmly, "The House of Black and White may have its rules, but when my life is threatened, I must take action to protect myself." The Sea King frowned and raised his voice and said, "I have promised to compensate you. I will let you go to my treasure house and choose whatever you want, including Daenerys' compensation. You can take it together, but because of what you did in Bravus. After you have chosen the gift, please leave immediately. From today on, you and your fleet will never set foot in Bravus again." Gavin looked calm and responded, "Your Highness, Sea King, I have no intention of causing trouble here. Now that the problem has been solved, I will naturally leave." The Sea King stared at Gavin sharply and said, "I hope you will keep your word, otherwise the wrath of Bravus will not be something you can bear." Gavin bowed and said, "Don't worry, Your Highness, I will keep my promise." Aquaman waved his hand, signaling the end of the conversation. Led by a water dancer, Gavin walked slowly along the deep corridor. On both sides of the corridor, there stood a fully armed guard every few steps, holding sharp spears in their hands, motionless like sculptures. The closer they got to the treasury, the more solemn the atmosphere became. In front of the treasury gate, there were two teams of elite soldiers standing ready for battle. They were dressed in heavy armor, holding shields and swords, and exuded a terrifying aura. The entrance to the treasury is two huge stone doors carved with ancient and mysterious patterns. The water dancer walked up and said something to the soldiers, and then two soldiers pushed open the heavy stone door. With a dull sound, the interior of the treasure house appeared before Gavin's eyes. "Sir Gawain, please follow me. According to His Highness's order, you only have 1 hour, and you can only take two things away, one to compensate you and the other to compensate the Targaryen princess." The water dancer on the side said solemnly. Gavin nodded slightly and followed the water dancer into this mysterious and tempting treasure house. The moment he stepped into the treasure house, Gavin was shocked by the scene before him. Rows of tall display racks are arranged in an orderly manner, filled with all kinds of rare treasures. On one shelf, there were several Valyrian steel swords, with the unique Valyrian steel pattern on the blades, and the blades were extremely sharp. In the brocade box next to them, there were also several daggers made of Valyrian steel. Not far away, there was a set of gorgeous armor made of pure gold. It still shone with golden brilliance under the dim light. The armor was inlaid with various gems, highlighting its extraordinary value. In the corner of the treasury, there were piles of precious furs, including white wolf skins from the far north and rare striped bear skins. In the center of the treasure house, there is a huge crystal ball, which seems to be filled with mist and emits a faint light. Next to the crystal ball, several dragon egg fossils are quietly displayed, and the texture on the eggshell seems to tell an ancient story. Going further in, Gavin saw huge dragon bone products piled there. There was also a row of mysterious books with metal covers and inlaid with gems. In addition, there were various exquisite crafts made of Valyrian steel, such as small sculptures, gorgeous ornaments, etc., each of which was exquisitely crafted. Chapter 86. Valyrian Steel Sword Dawn. Gavin's eyes slowly swept over the various treasures in the treasury, and then walked straight to the shelf where the weapons were placed. Gavin carefully examined the Valyrian steel swords on the shelf. Finally, he found the emblem of the Bellarese family on the hilt of a sword. It was the lost family sword of the Bellarese family ancestor, Dawnbreaker. Gavin's eyes flashed with surprise and emotion. He gently picked up the sword. The blade was slender and straight, flashing a cold silver light. The blade was so sharp that you could hardly see its thickness, but it was sharp enough to cut through everything. The hilt was made of dragon bone, with a simple yet elegant shape. The guard was slightly curved, protecting the hand just right. Feeling the surging magic power of the longsword dawn, Gavin's mind was filled with thoughts. At this moment, he finally made up for his mother's regret. After putting Dawn away, Gavin continued to explore the treasure house. He looked around and walked to the center of the treasure house where the dragon egg fossils were placed. There were 6 dragon egg fossils neatly stacked there. Gavin picked up one and used his magic to feel it carefully. Suddenly, he was surprised to find that this dragon egg actually had a weak vitality. Gavin was so excited that he immediately checked the other dragon eggs. Unfortunately, only the one in his hand was still alive. So, he chose this dragon egg as compensation for the rest without hesitation. Gavin said to the water dancer in the distance, "I've made my choice." The water dancer nodded slightly and said, "Sir Gavin, please follow me." Then he left with Gavin. Soon, Gavin discovered that the other party did not lead him to see Aquaman, but took him directly to the outside of Aquaman's palace. However, Gavin, who had already reaped a great deal, didn't care about it. After handing the dragon egg to the blood dragon guard who had been waiting there, he slowly walked towards the port. The water dancer walked into the Sea King's palace. The Sea King sat on the magnificent throne and asked majestically, "What did he choose?" The water dancer immediately said respectfully, "A Valyrian steel sword and a dragon egg fossil." After hearing this, Aquaman fell into deep thought. He was not surprised that Gavin chose the Valyrian steel sword, but why did Gavin choose the dragon egg fossil that could not hatch a dragon? He frowned and murmured to himself, "Could it be that the dragon egg is intact?" Thinking of this, Aquaman's face instantly became gloomy, and his heart was even more heartbroken. But soon, he comforted himself, "It shouldn't be possible. The chance is very small." Then he thought about the trouble he was facing at the moment. Although it was painful to give away these 2 things, it was also a good thing to let Gavin, that troublesome person, leave. Aquaman really didn't dare to take action against Gavin, and it was difficult for him to explain to the people of Bravus, so he could only balance the matter by expelling the other party. Thinking of this, Aquaman sighed helplessly. Gavin returned to the Bel Aris with the treasures he had selected, and immediately saw Daenerys, who was waiting anxiously there. When she saw that he had returned safely, she immediately rushed over and hugged Gavin tightly. Gavin stroked her hair gently and said, "Don't worry, I'm fine. Aquaman doesn't dare to attack me easily." Daenerys raised her head, her eyes slightly red, and her voice trembled a little, "I was just worried about you, it's great that you can come back." Then she asked, "Where are we going now?" Gavin smiled and responded, "Aquaman has given us permission to leave." Daenerys asked again, "Gavin, are we going back to your stepstones?" Gavin shook his head and said, "Not yet. I have to go to the land beyond the wall. There are huge timbers there that can be used to make keels for warships. I need these things right now." Daenerys leaned into his arms and said, "I will follow you wherever you go." Gavin patted her shoulder gently, and then ordered everyone on the Bel Aris, "Notify the fleet, everyone set sail, we are leaving immediately." As Gavin gave the order, the entire fleet became busy in an instant. Sailors jumped off the dock, untied the ropes and hoisted the sails. The sea breeze blew the sails, making a loud noise. The Bel Aris took the lead and sailed steadily towards the mouth of the canyon. Gavin held Daenerys' hand, stood at the bow, and looked at the port of Bravus that was getting farther and farther away. Daenerys was filled with mixed feelings. The city where she grew up was gradually becoming blurred in her sight. The familiar streets, the noisy markets, and the friendly faces were all getting farther and farther away. She pursed her lips slightly, and a trace of reluctance and attachment was revealed in her eyes. She looked back at Gavin beside her and found that Gavin was also looking at her. The two smiled at each other. The fleet gradually approached the mouth of the canyon, and the purple fleet that was blocking it had already given way. The Bel Aris passed first, and soon the entire fleet passed the Titan. The fleet once again successfully passed this iconic checkpoint and bid farewell to Bravus completely. The fleet was once again located on the endless fjord. Gavin couldn't help but think of the instigator of all this, the messenger from Rhys, and immediately made new arrangements for the fleet. Under his command, 10 sailing ships broke away from the fleet and headed south. If it weren't for the Sea King, Gaon would have taken action against the messenger from Lis when he was in Bravus. Now that he has left Bravus, Gaon no longer has to worry about anything. Gavin ordered 10 sailing ships to cruise and wait along several possible routes that the messenger might take back. Once they spotted him, they would capture him and take him to the Stone Steps Islands. After making all these arrangements, Gavin took Daenerys back to the cabin. Gavin took out a small box and placed it on the table. He smiled at Daenerys and said, "The Sea King asked me to pick something to compensate you. I think you will like it." Daenerys was curious after hearing this. Gavin smiled and said, "It's a dragon egg fossil. I found that it still has vitality." Daenerys' eyes lit up with excitement when she heard it. Gavin opened the box with a smile, and a dragon egg emitting a red glow appeared in front of Daenerys. Daenerys couldn't help but hold her breath, as if she could truly feel the powerful power contained in the dragon egg. She walked forward excitedly, and gently stroked the dragon egg with both hands, her eyes full of anticipation and excitement. "Is it really a dragon egg? This is incredible. I only heard Viserys describe the appearance of dragon eggs to me. There are many dragon egg fossils on Dragonstone, but I have never seen one." Gavin suddenly asked, "Daenerys, did Viserys ever tell you how the Targaryen family hatched dragons?" Chapter 87. How to hatch dragon eggs. Daenerys thought carefully and said, "Viserys told me some stories about families hatching dragon eggs. It seems that there is no specific method of hatching. The Targaryens would place the dragon eggs in the cradle of a newborn baby. If they are lucky, they can hatch. They can also place the dragon eggs in a high-temperature environment, which may also hatch. After the Dance of the Dragons, no dragon eggs were successfully hatched. Later Targaryens tried countless methods, invited wizards, and even burned a king to death." The tragedy of Summer Hall. Gavin interrupted. Daenerys nodded. "Yes, Viserys told me that King Aegon V prepared 7 dragon eggs and attempted to hatch them with wildfires in Summer Hall. However, the wildfires spread out of control. King Aegon V, his eldest son, and many members of the royal family died in the disaster, and the dragon eggs disappeared without a trace." At this point, Daenerys suddenly realized the difficulty of hatching dragon eggs, and she couldn't help feeling a little lost. Gavin fell into deep thought. It seems that the method of hatching dragon eggs mastered by the Targaryen family is not complete, and it is all a matter of luck. He couldn't help but recall the records in Belarus's Dragon Cave. According to the stele in the Dragon Cave, in addition to the natural hatching of dragon eggs, as long as the dragon eggs still contain vitality, they can be forcibly hatched by burning with dragon flames. The ritual does not require the sacrifice of life, but the key is the blood of the unburnt. The dragon eggs are immersed in a container filled with the blood of the unburnt and continuously burned with dragon flames. The blood of the unburnt can effectively prevent the dragon eggs from being destroyed by the dragon flames, and can also absorb the magic contained in the dragon flames. Gavin looked up at Daenerys and comforted her, "Don't worry, the Belarus family has a way that we can try." Daenerys immediately became excited, "Really? Then can we try it now?" Gavin smiled and said, "Not yet. The container needed for the ceremony must be made of dragon crystal. Although there is some on the ship, it is scattered dragon crystal ore. We need to go ashore first, make a container with dragon flame, and then hold the ceremony to hatch the dragon egg." Daenerys suppressed her excitement and nodded, "Okay, Gavin, let's wait a little longer." At this time, the fleet reached the intersection of the Straight Sea and the Trembling Sea. The waves were surging, and the waves collided with each other, splashing layers of white foam. The wind howled on the sea, raising huge waves. The sky was covered with dark clouds and thunder rumbled faintly, as if the sea was venting its violence and mystery. Gavin plans to go to Skagen Island first to try to hatch dragon eggs there. Skagen is a small island in the north, located northwest of Skagos and further north than the Wall. The Skagans on the island had long ago been plundered, killed, or devoured by the Skagors. Since Skagans was almost uninhabited and only a half-day's sail from the Hardhome Wildling Market at the head of Stord, it was convenient for Gavin to use it as a transit station. At the same time, on Bloodstone Island, a ship flying the flag of the Crowned Stag finally arrived at the port of Bloodstone Island after more than a month of sailing. As Peter's ship slowly docked, Boris, who had received the news, had already led everyone there to greet him respectfully. Peter walked down the ship gracefully, and Boris immediately came forward and said with a smile, "Respected Lord Peter, welcome to Bloodstone Island again. I heard that you have just taken office as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I am really happy for you. I wonder what instructions you have for this visit." Peter bowed slightly and answered politely, "Thanks to the appreciation of His Majesty the King and the Prime Minister, I have this opportunity. Governor Boris, I am here to convey the relevant instructions by order of the Imperial Council." Governor Boris was startled and said quickly, "My lord, please make it clear." Peter took out a roll of exquisite parchment tied with gold thread and handed it to Boris. Then he said solemnly, "From now on, the Stepstone Islands will establish a tax collector system based on the model of the 5 major ports in West Eros. The tax revenue here will be collected by the tax collectors I brought with me. After statistics are compiled every year, they will be distributed to Sir Gavin according to the corresponding proportion." Governor Boris looked embarrassed and quickly explained, "Lord Peter, Lord Gavin is not in the territory now. I am only the governor of Bloodstone Island and I really have no right to make a decision on this." Peter shook his head slightly and said in a gentle voice, "Governor Boris, this is an order from the Imperial Council. It cannot be refused." Governor Boris frowned, thought for a moment and said, "Sir, if that's the case, then we'll do as you say. Your tax officer can collect taxes here, but my people must follow and supervise. In addition, all taxes collected must not be transported away from Bloodstone Island. Everything must wait until Lord Gavin returns before making a final decision." Peter nodded, still maintaining a gentle tone, "That will be the case for now. Thank you Governor Boris for your cooperation." Petal paused for a moment, then continued, "There is one more thing. According to the laws of the kingdom, the Stepstone Islands are prohibited from purchasing slaves. Governor, please pay attention to this matter." Boris frowned and responded, "My lord, I have made note of this matter, but the specific implementation will have to wait for Sir Gawain to come back for discussion." Peter's face was serious. "Of course, but no more slave ships must enter the Stepstones until Sir Gawain returns." After Boris settled Peter, he hurried back to his residence. His face was solemn and he immediately called his men. "Go, immediately send someone to keep an eye on all the people who got off the ship just now. Don't miss any of their moves, and report anything unusual to me immediately. Also, quickly send someone to call back Commander Hassan who is patrolling near Grey Gallows Island. Don't make any mistakes." Boris ordered sternly. The men responded in unison and quickly turned around to carry out the order. After more than 10 days of sailing, the fleet finally arrived at the island of Skane. The island looked desolate and lonely, with jagged rocks and sparse vegetation. The cold wind whistled past, as if it could penetrate the bone marrow. 2 warships lowered small boats filled with soldiers, who cautiously set foot on this strange land to conduct advance reconnaissance. Gavin was not idle either. He summoned the Blazing Shadow, took the dragon crystal he had prepared in advance, and rode on the Blazing Shadow with Daenerys to fly towards the island. Looking down from the air, the scenery of the island is clearer. Large areas of rocks are exposed, and only a few cold-resistant plants grow with difficulty in the cold wind. The tops of the mountains in the distance are even covered with white snow, which looks cold and majestic under the gloomy sky. Gawain and Daenerys rode on the back of the dragon Blazing Shadow, feeling the biting cold wind, and flew towards a cliff by the sea. Chapter 88. Vice-Ryan. The huge body of the Blazing Shadow landed on the cliff. Gavin hugged Daenerys tightly, then jumped off the dragon's back with her in his arms, and landed steadily on the ground with his feet. He quickly took out all the dragon crystals, piled them together, and then ordered Jia Ying with a serious look to burn the black dragon crystals with dragon flames. Under the high temperature of the dragon flame, the dragon crystal began to soften gradually and emitted a dazzling light. Gavin was fully focused and took the opportunity to use the power of a fire wizard to precisely control the dragon crystal that was flowing like magma. His hands kept gesturing as if he was shaping a precious work of art. Daenerys watched all this nervously and expectantly, her hands clenched unconsciously, her breathing became rapid, her eyes never left Gavin's actions, and at the same time she was full of trust in Gavin's abilities. This process lasted for a long time. Finally, after the dragon crystal cooled naturally, a black, simple and rough round basin appeared in front of Gavin and Daenerys. Daenerys took a deep breath, looked at the ugly container, a trace of worry flashed in her eyes, and said, "Will this work?" Gavin wiped the sweat from his forehead, smiled slightly, and said, "It's just a container for blood. The next step is the key. Success or failure should have nothing to do with appearance." After Gavin placed the dragon eggs he had prepared in advance into a slightly larger dragon crystal basin, he looked at Daenerys beside him with encouragement. Gavin estimated that a lot of blood would be needed, and it would be a bit difficult for him to draw blood alone. Fortunately, Daenerys was also an unburnt. Daenerys had heard Gavin's explanation long ago. She took a deep breath, took out a dagger, gritted her teeth and cut her wrist. The bright red blood flowed out, flowing down her hand into the black stone basin and dripping onto the dragon egg. As more and more blood flowed, her face gradually turned pale and her body began to tremble slightly. Seeing this, Gavin hurriedly took out the potion, cut his wrist, dripped blood into the potion, and handed it to Daenerys to take. After taking the potion, Daenerys' wrist injury healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Gavin ignored his wound and continued to release his blood into the basin. When Gavin felt a little haggard, the blood in the basin finally covered the dragon egg. Gavin suppressed his weakness, took out a dragon crystal lid full of holes, and carefully covered the stone basin. At this time, the dragon egg in the stone basin was completely covered with blood, emitting a strange and mysterious light. Gavin ordered Jia Ying to carefully spit out dragon flame, and the blazing dragon flame instantly enveloped the dragon crystal basin. Under the scorching dragon flame, the dragon crystal basin no longer showed signs of melting as before, but instead emitted a bright red glow, like a red-hot iron block. Daenerys watched with anticipation, clasped her hands together, and prayed silently that the dragon eggs would hatch successfully. Gavin comforted him, "It may not be completed in a short time. The dragon flame will continue to spray for a long time. Please wait patiently." The two waited at the edge of the cliff. The sky gradually darkened, and the waves kept hitting the bottom of the cliff, making bursts of roaring sounds. The sea breeze became colder, making their clothes rustle. Although the dragon flame spewed by Jia Ying was small, he seemed exhausted after spewing for a long time. He stopped several times and looked at Gavin with eyes full of resentment. When Gavin saw this, he could only give an apologetic look and offer comfort. Finally, the red dragon crystal basin began to move and shook violently, as if the blood inside was boiling. Gavin immediately ordered Jia Ying to stop spitting dragon flames, then he calmed Jia Ying down and let it fly into the sea to hunt. As Jia Ying flew away, the surroundings became quiet for a moment, with only the sounds of sea breeze and waves. Gavin and Daenerys stared at the red-hot dragon crystal basin nervously, not daring to make a sound. Gavin was not sure whether this method could hatch a dragon. Finally, the dragon crystal basin stopped shaking. They immediately stared at the basin nervously. Suddenly, the lid of the basin was lifted up by a force and then fell down. Gavin immediately took off the lid, and a small and mighty red dragon appeared in the basin. It spread its tender wings and gave a clear cry to Gavin, its eyes full of curiosity about the world. This young dragon is about the size of a kitten, with sharp horns on its head that add a bit of majesty. Its entire body is covered with gorgeous dark red scales, which sparkle as bright as gems in the afterglow of the setting sun, and are extremely beautiful. The little dragon seemed to instinctively feel the kindness of Gavin and Daenerys. It staggered out of the basin, flew around them a few times, and then landed on Daenerys' shoulder. It rubbed its head against her cheek affectionately and made a low chirping sound from its mouth, as if expressing its joy. Daenerys stroked the little dragon's scales in surprise, her eyes full of joy. Gavin looked at this scene and said with a smile, "Give it a name." Daenerys couldn't help but think of the dead Viserys. This dragon egg was also a compensation for his death. She said with an idea, "Let's call it Viceroy." Hearing the name, the little dragon seemed to sense something and flapped its wings happily. After returning to the Bellarys, Daenerys hugged Viceroy with joy, and excitement flashed in her eyes. She couldn't wait to find a piece of fresh meat and carefully handed it to Viceroy, expecting him to eat it. However, Viceroy just leaned over, sniffed it with his small nose, and turned his head away in disgust, showing no interest in the meat. Gavin smiled and explained, "Dragons usually only eat cooked food. You should let it breathe fire. Once it obeys your command and spit dragon flames, it will truly belong to you and will only obey your orders from now on." When Daenerys heard this, her heart was pounding. She was nervous and expectant, with a hint of uneasiness that was difficult to conceal. She took a deep breath, tried to make her voice sound firm and powerful, and said to Viceroy, "Dragon flame, Viceroy, dragon flame." Viceroy tilted his small and exquisite head, and looked at Daenerys with confusion in his round eyes, as if he did not understand Daenerys' intention at all. Daenerys was not discouraged. She raised her voice again and ordered expectantly, "Viceroy, breathe fire." Finally, after Daenerys' persistent attempts, Viceroy seemed to suddenly realize something. He shook the scales on his body, then opened his mouth and blew a ball of dragon flame as weak as a candle at the piece of meat. Although the small dragon flame was weak, it quickly roasted the piece of meat, and bursts of fragrance instantly spread. Then Vice Ryan ate the cooked meat with relish. Gavin immediately observed Vice Ryan eating and said to Daenerys with a smile, "It looks like the little guy is pretty fierce." Chapter 89, Hardship. The bay near Hardhome formed a natural deep water harbour with abundant resources, which made it a wild town governed by several tribal leaders. The timber merchant mentioned by Vika obtained the huge timber from here. In Hardhome, the sun shines on the sea, the waves sparkle like tiny pieces of gold. The originally peaceful and tranquil savages are busy in an orderly manner, when suddenly someone points to the distance and shouts in panic, "Look! What is that?" Everyone turns their heads and sees dozens of huge ships appearing on the sea, like towering mountains. The crowd instantly fell into chaos, with shouts and screams coming one after another, interweaving into a noisy melody. "How is this going? Is it the Raven's ship? Go and inform the leader." People fled in all directions, some hurried back home to pick up their weapons, and others ran wildly in the direction of their leader. Gavin stood on the bow of the Bellarese, looking at the chaotic gathering of wildlings on the distant shore, and turned to Daenerys and said, "You will stay on the Bellarese for a while. When I am away, the fleet will obey your orders." Daenerys frowned and said with a worried look on her face, "Gavin, I always feel that there will be danger. You should ride on Blazing Shadow." Gavin comforted him, "Don't worry, it's just a business trip. Besides, riding on Blazing Shadow will only cause those savages to overreact." Afterwards, Gavin took several blood dragon guards and captains on 3 small boats and rowed slowly towards Hardhome. The savages on the shore looked at the 3 small boats coming over, clenched their weapons, gathered towards the shore, and stared at Gavin with vigilance. As Gavin stepped onto the shore, the savages looked at their team of only a dozen people, and their expressions relaxed a little, but they still surrounded Gavin tightly, with no intention of dispersing. Gavin looked around calmly and saw a group of savages in the distance struggling to push through the crowd and striding towards this place. As the wildlings made way, Gavin's eyes were fixed on a woman walking in front. It was the female leader who would later cooperate with Jon Snow to evacuate the wildlings. As for her name, Gavin couldn't remember it for the moment. He thought to himself, she must be the real boss. The woman was tall and slender, with eyes as sharp as an eagle, and she was wearing a dress made of thick fur. She walked straight to Gavin, looked him up and down, and said coldly, "You are from the south, what are you doing in our territory?" Gavin bowed slightly and said politely, "Hello, ma'am. My name is Gavin Bellarese. I have plenty of food, good weapons, and some daily necessities. I want to exchange some goods with the free folks." The woman snorted coldly upon hearing this, "Humph, I hope you are telling the truth. There were merchants who came here to trade before, but there were also many people with ill intentions who wanted to rob free people as slaves. Now those people have been eaten by the Thens. I advise you to put aside other thoughts here." Gavin smiled and nodded, "Madam, I only brought a dozen people this time, which is enough to show my sincerity." "What is your name?" The woman said coldly, "Just call me Osha, follow me, Southerner." As he said that, he turned and walked towards the depths of the camp. Seeing this, Gavin followed closely with his men. Osha led Gavin and his party to walk in the camp. Gavin looked around and saw that the surrounding environment was extremely simple. Some crudely built sheds were scattered in disorder, and simple tools were also placed randomly in a mess. Several dirty wild children ran over with curiosity and surrounded Gavin and his party. Soon, they arrived in front of a large wooden house. Osha motioned to Gavin to wait here and then walked in. Gavin stood quietly outside the door, and could vaguely hear the low voices of conversation coming from inside the house. After a moment, Osha came out and invited Gavin into the house. In the middle of the hall, there was a blazing bonfire. Several wild chiefs sat around it, all looking at Gavin. One of the chiefs was the first to ask, "Southerner, tell me, how many furs do you want to exchange from us, and how much food do you have?" After hearing this, Gavin responded, "My dear leaders, I am not here for furs, but to exchange for huge trees that can be used to build ships." After hearing Gavin's words, the leaders looked at each other in bewilderment. One of them frowned and said, "Timber? Some people did come here to exchange for it before, but those timbers were brought by giants. Now there is no stock here. If you need it, you can only go to the giants, but the giants are not in Hard Village now." Gavin looked calm. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I would like you to help me contact those giants. I am willing to pay a certain amount of money for this." As long as the other party is willing to trade with me, I will also offer a generous reward to express my gratitude. Another leader stroked his chin with his hand and said thoughtfully, that sounds good. How much can you give? Gavin continued, half of the ship's supplies. If you can help me make a deal, the remaining half of the ship's supplies will also belong to you. At this time, Osha, who had been silent all this time, spoke up, Southerners, we agree. But we need time to contact the giants, and the half shipload of supplies you promised to pay must be delivered to us now. Gavin nodded slightly and said, okay, I will stay here while I wait. I hope you can give me a definite answer as soon as possible. Countless small boats shuttled back and forth on the sea, busy transporting supplies. Osha casually opened a bag of grain and saw that the grains inside were plump, bright in color, and exuded an enticing aroma. She picked up another long sword, the blade of which was sharp, the workmanship was exquisite, and the quality was high. Osha looked at these supplies. These were much better than what the merchants who came here before paid. Osha walked towards Gavin, who was standing on the beach. Gavin felt someone approaching and turned around to see it was Osha. He smiled and greeted her. Osha looked at Gavin, who no longer had the previous wariness in his eyes, and said, we will send people to look for the giants in a while, and we will have news in about 5 or 6 days. Southerner, don't you plan to exchange some of our furs? Gavin said calmly, well, you can, but I will give priority to exchanging for wood. I only brought 30 ships of goods. If there is any left at the end, I don't mind exchanging for some furs to take back. After hearing this, Osha immediately said, I'm afraid that even if you take out all the wood in the giant's stock, you can only exchange for half of it. Besides, they only need food, not these weapons and supplies. These weapons are too small for them. You must have a lot of surplus supplies. Chapter 90. Daenerys's family. Gavin pondered for a moment and said slowly, okay, in addition to food, I can also exchange 3 ships of weapons with you. At this moment, a group of crows flew over Hardhome and kept circling. Gavin sensed something and immediately looked at the group of crows. A feeling of being watched suddenly came over him. He guessed that it must be the attention of the 3-eyed raven. The crows seemed to notice Gavin's gaze and quickly flew away from the area. Afterwards, Gavin no longer paid attention to the crows, but chatted with Osha beside him. Gavin also learned about the recent situation of the savages from Osha. At present, Mance Rayder has not yet become the king beyond the wall, but with his excellent eloquence and leadership, he has still gathered nearly half of the wildling tribes together. However, the wildling tribes in the north near the land of Everwinter have shown unusual movements, and they have begun to migrate south. Mance Rayder claims that he has found traces of the White Walkers. But for the wildlings living in Hardhome, all this seems too incredible. They have not seen it with their own eyes, so they are skeptical about Mance Rayder's statement. Talking about the White Walkers, Osha suddenly asked, Southerner, do you believe in the existence of White Walkers? After hearing this, Gavin was moved. After thinking for a moment, he said, I believe it, and within a year or 2, you should be able to contact it. After hearing this, Osha was full of doubts and asked, why? Why are you so sure? Gavin looked serious and said solemnly, White Walkers are real, and as the weather gets colder, they will gradually invade the south. The wildling tribes in the north will also be forced to migrate south because of the White Walkers, until the White Walkers force you to retreat and you can only try to attack the wall. In the end, most people will die in the siege, and the rest can only stay north of the wall and wait to die. Osha was incredulous after hearing this. She felt that this southerner was deceiving her and asked angrily, how can you guarantee that what you said is true? Why should I trust a southerner? Gavin was calm and said frankly, you don't need to believe me, Osha, time will prove it. I plan to give you a way out. It's up to you whether to choose it or not. The wood I want to buy must be painted with anti-corrosion paint, so I set up a transit station on the island of Skagen not far from Hardhome, and there will be ships staying there. When you really face the situation where the White Walkers are heading south and you can't avoid them, you can take your tribe on my ship to take refuge there. After hearing this, Osha looked solemn and said cautiously, Southerners, why do you want to help us? Free people will never kneel, or do you want to sell free people as slaves? Gavin smiled and said frankly, if I want you to kneel, I will let you go to my territory, the Stone Steps Islands. As for enslaving you, with my strength, there is no need to use deception. As Gavin finished speaking, a ball of fire with a diameter of more than 1 meter instantly shot out from his hand and rushed towards the sea in front of him. The raging and hot flames instantly evaporated a large amount of steam when they met the sea water. Osha was frightened by Gavin's mysterious method and quickly retreated, drew out her weapon, and looked at Gavin vigilantly. Gavin slowly retracted his right hand, looked at Osha who was on guard, and said calmly, "Leaving you here to die will undoubtedly increase the strength of the White Walkers. For me, it may cause some troubles, that's all. As for my advice, consider it when you need to face the White Walkers." Then Gavin ignored the vigilant female leader and turned away. On the Bel Aris, Gavin arranged the division of labor for several captains and walked towards the cabin. As soon as he entered the room, he saw Daenerys teasing Vice-Ryan. Seeing this, Gavin also joined in. The two of them teased Vice-Ryan together. Daenerys stroked Viserion's scales and couldn't help but sigh, "When I was a child, I always heard Viserys tell me about the wonders of dragons. Gavin, how long do you think it will take for it to grow to the size of Blazing Shadow?" After hearing this, Gavin also fell into thought. Gavin was just guessing about Blazing Shadow's age. After all, it often went hungry when it was in the dragon cave of Valyria, and it was lucky to survive. Malnutrition must have caused its body size to be smaller than that of a dragon of the same age. Gavin had always suspected that the size of the Blazing Shadow after the advancement was in line with its true age, but in the short 2 months since the Blazing Shadow's advancement, it had grown a lot and was estimated to be about 26 meters in size now. It was getting more and more cramped on the deck of the Bel Aris, so that during long voyages, Gavin could only take it into his body. Thinking of this, Gavin guessed, it will probably take more than 10 years. The stone tablet in the dragon's lair only describes the history of the Bel Aris family and mentions some techniques for taming dragons and hatching dragon eggs. The knowledge left by the Bellarese family has all turned to dust over the years, and I'm afraid that the knowledge related to dragons is not as much as that of the Targaryens. After all, during the more than 100 years that the Targaryens conquered Westeros, the number of dragons increased steadily, and even at its peak, there were more than 20 dragons. But Daenerys doesn't know much now. Her knowledge comes from Viserys, but Viserys was still young when he escaped from the Red Castle, and he probably hasn't learned that knowledge systematically. If one wants to find this knowledge now, one may only look through the books in the Red Keep and the Citadel in Old Town, but these two places are not easily accessible. Suddenly, Gavin thought of a man Aemon Targaryen, the old man who was a maester on the wall, and he was Daenerys' great-uncle. A member of the Targaryen family who has lived long enough must know this knowledge, and he is currently in Castle Black, which is not far from us. Thinking of this, Gavin asked Daenerys, "Do you know your great-uncle Aemon Targaryen?" After hearing this, Daenerys fell into deep thought. Seeing her puzzled look, Gavin immediately explained to her. After hearing Gavin's explanation, Daenerys immediately said excitedly, "Gavin, I want to meet him. This should be the last of my people." Suddenly, she looked worried and said, "If I go to see him, will it harm him? The usurper will definitely kill him when he finds out." Gavin patted Daenerys's hand gently and comforted her, "Don't worry, the usurper will not attack an old man who is nearly 100 years old. Besides, you can dress up as my servant." Daenerys smiled immediately. "Really? When can we go?" Gavin thought for a moment and said, "It should be quick. Once I finish dealing with things here, it will take about 10 days. Chapter 91. Mance Rayder. Gavin wandered dazedly along the hillside, overlooking the vast sea below. The waves crashed against the beach, making deafening roars, and the sea breeze blew gently, bringing with it the familiar, salty smell. A thin child was struggling to drag a heavy iron pot out of the sea, and then moving it with difficulty towards a pile of firewood in the distance. His small body was shaking in the strong sea breeze. Gavin looked at this familiar yet strange scene, full of doubts. He quickly looked behind him, and his eyes finally fixed on the 3 tall towers standing in the distance. He thought quickly in his mind, "This is the 3 towers territory, why am I here? I understand, this is a dream." Just as Gavin was lost in thought, an old and deep voice suddenly sounded behind him. "You should have died early from disease and starvation, but you broke the predetermined trajectory of fate. What helped you? Was it that?" At this time, the child below finally succeeded in placing the pot on the firewood pile. He stretched out his finger, and a ball of fire ignited out of thin air, setting the firewood pile on fire. Looking at the scene below, Gavin finally realized that all this was a dream brought to him by the 3-eyed raven. He turned and looked behind him, only to see an old man in a black robe and with white hair, so he asked tentatively, "Three-eyed raven. It seems that you know me. Some people also call me the Green Prophet." The voice of the three-eyed raven was as calm as a lake, but it contained an invisible pressure. Gavin frowned, his eyes full of vigilance. "I know much more than that, Bryndon Rivers. Why did you bring me here? We have never had any contact before, how did you bring me into this dream?" The three-eyed raven looked deep. "It seems that you are much more dangerous and know more than I expected. Not only have you broken the trajectory of your own destiny, but you have also changed too many established futures. Now the threat from the north is becoming more and more serious, and the preparations that can fight against it have been destroyed by you. Arya Stark was supposed to be trained in the House of Black and White, but you burned it down. Daenerys was supposed to marry the King of the Horse, but you took her away." After hearing this, Gavin responded coldly, "Yes, I know. But I am just trying to protect myself, and sometimes I really don't have time to care too much." The three-eyed raven shook his head. "What you have done has triggered a series of chain reactions. If you continue like this, the consequences will be disastrous." After hearing this, Gavin asked calmly, "What do you think?" The three-eyed raven looked at Gavin meaningfully. "I hope you can leave the north, return to your Stepstone Islands, and not have any more contact with the Stark family." After hearing this, Gavin smiled sarcastically and said, "Are you afraid that I will influence Bran Stark?" The three-eyed raven did not answer Gavin, but said calmly, "You can always touch the heart tree and ask me any questions about Westeros." Gavin also understood that the three-eyed raven had no choice but to let him go in this way of trading. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Are there any dragon eggs in Westeros?" The three-eyed raven replied, "There are many, but most of them are no longer hatchable and have become fossils. Only 3 dragon eggs still contain vitality." Gavin then asked, "Where's Cobain?" The three-eyed raven said, "Not long ago, he was taken away from the 3 towers by your people and boarded a ship to leave Westeros. After he left, I have no idea of his whereabouts." Gavin asked again, "Is the Dark Sister with you?" The three-eyed crow said, "I can tell you about the Dark Sisters and the dragon eggs, the family swords of the Targaryen family, as long as you can leave the north." Gavin nodded and said, "I will do my best. After I finish the affairs here, I will leave the north." The three-eyed raven then said, "I will know when you touch any heart tree, and you will then be able to sense my location." "How did you pull me into the dream?" Gavin asked the original question again after hearing it. The three-eyed raven explained, "You have magical powers and are in the north. It is not that I brought you into the dream, but that I entered your dream." Listening to the three-eyed raven's explanation, Gavin fell into deep thought. Then he looked at the three-eyed raven and said, "I'm fine, but I want to make one last attempt." After that, the sun in the dream became even hotter, and in a short moment, the vegetation on the ground began to burn and turned into ashes. Gavin witnessed this doomsday-like scene, and the dream world began to fall apart. Gavin woke up suddenly and found Daenerys still sleeping soundly in his arms. Under the moonlight, a crow stood in front of the window, and flapped its wings and flew away as Gavin stared at it. 3 days later, Gavin, who was on the boat thinking about his trip to Castle Black, received a message from Osha. The other party expressed the hope that Gavin could go ashore. After hearing this, Gavin decided without hesitation to go and find out what the other party's purpose was. On the boat, Gavin saw Osa waiting at the shore from afar. Her eyes showed a complex and difficult to understand emotion. After Gavin got ashore, he walked straight to Osa and asked first, "What's the matter?" Osha looked at Gavin and responded simply, "Mance Rayder is here, and he wants to see you." When Gavin heard this, he was startled for a moment, then smiled and said, "In that case, let's meet." After saying that, Gavin followed Osha and once again passed through the savage camp that was familiar yet full of wildness. Soon, Gavin came to the spacious hall again. At this time, Mance Rayder was the only one in the hall, sitting by the campfire, seemingly lost in thought. Mance Rayder saw Gavin come in and said nothing, but just looked him up and down. Gavin was the first to break the silence and said, "Mance Rayder, since you are here to talk to me, you must have something to say. Silence is not the way to treat guests." Mance Rayder smiled and said, "I'm very sorry. It's hard for me to imagine that a southerner would know about the White Walkers. It seems that you are much more sober than those stupid lords in the south. I'm curious, are you here just to exchange for some wood?" After hearing this, Gavin answered frankly, I came here just on the way. I just left Bravus, which is not far from here. It just so happens that I also want to know the current situation of the White Walkers, so I followed along to take a look. Mance Rayder nodded and said, your guess is correct. The White Walkers are heading south. We don't have much time left. I have been trying my best to unite the free folk tribes and encourage them to migrate south. However, the wall is an obstacle for us. We need your ships so that our people can cross the wall. Chapter 92. Black Castle. Gavin shook his head decisively and refused. Mance Rayder, my ship is not your tool to invade the Seven Kingdoms. In order to prevent the White Walkers from becoming stronger, I can use the ship to take you to the island of Skagen for refuge, but that's all. Mance Rayder frowned, stepped forward and said, Skagen? How can such a small island support my people? Gavin, you are denying us the chance to survive. Gavin looked calm and said, I understand your situation, Mance Rayder. But invading the south and starting a war will bring more death and chaos. This is not a solution to the problem. Instead, it will make it easier for the White Walkers to break through the wall, and the chaotic Seven Kingdoms will not be able to resist the White Walkers. Mance Rayder sneered. Death and chaos? When have the Southern Lords ever cared about the lives of wildlings like us? They built a wall to keep us out and called us wildlings. Gavin said calmly, Mance Rayder, even if you succeed in crossing the wall, what can you do? The White Walkers will not stop their march southward, and you will still be unable to escape in the end. Moreover, because of your invasion of the Seven Kingdoms, you will completely lose the opportunity to resist the White Walkers. Of course, I can give you a chance to survive. If you are willing to be loyal to me, I will arrange a proper resettlement for my people. Mance Rayder waved his hands angrily and roared, Pledge allegiance? That's what you're thinking. We freemen will never kneel to anyone, and we will never become slaves of the Southern Lords. We are born free and we die free. Gavin spread his hands, smiled helplessly, and said, Mance Rayder, what you call freedom is robbery, plunder, and killing? When you step into someone else's territory, shouldn't you abide by the laws there? I am eager to gain the loyalty of the free people, and in return, I also give you a chance to survive. Mance Rayder said firmly, we follow the laws of nature outside the wall. We fight for survival. This is the way the free people have always survived. Gavin laughed and said, if you can't change your so-called way of survival, there will be no future survival. After hearing this, Mance Rayder stopped talking and fell silent, as if he was thinking deeply about something. If you want to rob ships, I advise you to give up this idea. Even if you succeed in robbing one or two ships by chance, they will be sunk by other warships. Gavin reminded. After being exposed, Mance Rayder said disdainfully, Gawan Bale Ryan, you seem to have us in your grasp, but you do not understand the free folk. Gavin nodded and said, perhaps. Maybe I don't understand the free people, but I understand human nature. In the moment of life and death, people will change many of their previous beliefs. After he finished speaking, Gavin looked at Osha behind him and said, think about your children. Isn't it your responsibility to save their lives? Then Gavin ignored the two silent people and turned away calmly, saying as he walked away, there is still plenty of time. Think about it carefully, Mance Rayder. Gawan never saw Mance Rayder again after that conversation, and heard that he had left Hardhome, so Gawan guessed that he had continued to gather the wildlings. One day, Osha sent a message to inform that the giant Gavin had agreed to the deal and was currently transporting wood to Hardhome. However, due to the long distance and the huge amount of wood to be transported, it might take quite some time to complete the task. After a brief consideration, Gavin immediately entrusted some experienced and steady captains to take charge of the remaining matters. In addition, he ordered the other warships to start their return journey, except for those armed merchant ships that were left for escort and necessary defense. After arranging all this, Gavin took Daenerys and rode on a flying dragon to the direction of the Black Castle. After landing in an open space not far from the Black Castle, Gavin took Daenerys on foot towards the ancient castle. Gavin led Daenerys towards the Black Castle. Not far away, the wall stood tall. This magnificent building made of ice and huge stones was 700 feet high, like a sleeping dragon lying on the ground. The sun shone on the ice surface of the wall, reflecting a dazzling light. Below the Great Wall, the outline of the Black Castle gradually became clear. The castle walls were very low and built entirely of black stone, contrasting with the white Great Wall, looking solemn and majestic. Although it was summer, there was still unmelted snow at the foot of the Great Wall, adding a bit of coolness to the land. As they got closer, the guards of the Black Castle soon spotted the two people in the distance, but seeing that there were only two of them, the guards did not pay any attention. When Gawain and Daenerys arrived at the foot of the castle, the guards shouted, "Who are you and what is your purpose here?" Gavin walked forward and said to the guard, "I am Gavin Bellarese, Lord of the Stepstones. I'm here with my squire and would like to see Jeor Mormont, commander of the Night's Watch. Please pass the message on." After that, he turned sideways to glance at Daenerys, who was already wearing a hood and dressed like a tomboy. The guard frowned, looked Gavin and Daenerys up and down, hesitated for a moment and said, "Wait here, I'll go and report." Then he turned and walked quickly into the castle. Not long after, the guard reappeared and raised his hand to signal, "The commander agrees to see you, come with me." Hearing this, Gavin pulled Daenerys' sleeve, and the two followed the guard into the Black Castle. Gavin followed the guard into the house and saw two people sitting behind a slightly old wooden table. The grey-haired, strong-bodied old man is the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Jeor Mormont. Next to him sits Maester Aemon, who has grey hair and cloudy eyes. Mormont looked up at Gavin with a hint of confusion in his eyes. "Gavin Bellarese? I have never heard of this family." Gavin bowed respectfully and said, "Commander-in-Chief, I was awarded the Development Order a few years ago and became the lord of a newly developed territory. Before that, I was operating in the south, which is a remote area. It's normal that you don't know about it." Mormont nodded and said, "I see. I know Sir Gawain of the Stepstones. It is no small achievement that you were able to conquer them." Maester Aemon on the side tilted his head slightly, as if trying to see Gawain and Daenerys clearly, his eyes searching them. After a few words of small talk, Mormont asked, "So, Lord Gawain, what brings you all the way to the wall?" Mormont frowned, then asked, "And are there only two of you walking here?" Chapter 93. Maester Aemon. Gavin answered frankly, "That's not the case, Lord Commander. I led a fleet to Bravos a while ago. The ship landed at Eastwatch by the sea. The rest of the journey was just me and my attendant. I wanted to visit the wall. I had only heard of its majesty before, but had never seen it." Mormont nodded and did not ask any more questions. He said politely, "In that case, Sir Gawain may stay for a visit. Castle Black is located in the north and the conditions are difficult. I hope you don't mind. We will do our best to entertain you." Gavin smiled, bowed and saluted, saying, "Thank you for your hospitality, Lord Commander. The Night's Watch is guarding the Great Wall for the kingdom, which is admirable. I also brought a ship of supplies with me this time. The ship is currently docked in Eastwatch and can be used by the Night's Watch." Upon hearing this, Mormont smiled gratefully and nodded, saying, "Thank you, Sir Gawain, for your assistance to the Night's Watch. We will always remember your generosity." As he spoke, Mormont called a Night's Watchman and was about to arrange for them to arrange a room for Gawain. Maester Aemon said at the side, "Let the guests follow me, I will make arrangements for them." Mormont turned to Maester Aemon and said, "I'll trouble you, Maester Aemon." Led by Maester Aemon, Gavin and Daenerys walked towards a wooden attic. Along the way, Maester Aemon walked slowly and introduced Gavin and the others to some of the layout and daily affairs of the Black Castle. Gawain listened carefully, but Daenerys' thoughts were always on Maester Aemon. Soon, they arrived in front of the attic. Maester Aemon pushed open the old wooden door and said, "Sir Gawain, conditions are limited. Please rest here for a while." Gawain walked into the house and looked around. Although the furnishings were simple, it was clean and tidy. "Thank you, Maester Aemon, that's all right now," Gavin said. Maester Aemon nodded slightly and was about to leave, but Daenerys suddenly stepped forward and took off her hood. When Maester Aemon saw Daenerys' face, especially her striking silver hair and purple eyes, his body suddenly shook. A flash of disbelief first flashed across his eyes, and then quickly filled with excitement and love. "You are? Daenerys, child, is it you?" Maester Aemon's voice trembled slightly. Daenerys' eyes were red, and she stepped forward quickly, "Great Uncle Aemon, it's me." Maester Aemon held Daenerys' hand tightly and said with a worried look on his face, "Child, it is too dangerous for you to return to Westeros. You must be careful and hide yourself." Maester Aemon then turned his gaze to Gawain and asked in confusion, "Viserys, you changed your name and gained a territory." When Gawain heard this, he realized that Maester Aemon had misunderstood. After all, he also had silver hair and purple eyes, and was about the same age as Viserys, so he was about to explain. Daenerys' eyes flashed with sadness, and she spoke first, "Great Uncle Aemon, my brother Viserys is dead. He was killed by an assassin sent by the usurper. He was Gawain, my fiancé, and a remnant of Valyria." "You misunderstood." Maester Aemon looked at Gavin in surprise, then returned his gaze to Daenerys and said solemnly, "My child, I only hope that you can leave this place as soon as possible and not get involved in the dispute over the Iron Throne. Live well in anonymity." After that, he looked at Gavin, his eyes full of expectation and entrustment. "Sir Gavin, I hope you can take good care of Daenerys." Gavin nodded solemnly and assured with a firm look, "Maester Aemon, don't worry, I will protect her." Daenerys bit her lip and said softly, "Great uncle, I know you are thinking about me, but..." At this time, Gavin said, "Maester Aemon, we came here this time because Daenerys wanted to meet you, her relative, and also because Daenerys hatched a red baby dragon, and I brought back a golden dragon over 20 meters long when I was exploring Valyria. But we know very little about dragons, and this time we came here to ask you for advice." Maester Aemon had a complicated expression after hearing this. He slowly said, "The Targaryen family prospered because of the dragons, and fell because of the extinction of the dragons. You should have brought your dragons with you when you came. Dragon riders are very likely to encounter dangers or even be killed if they leave their dragons." Gavin responded, "Don't worry, I have a plan for this." Maester Aemon said sternly, "You two must disguise yourself and not let anyone in the castle notice you. I cannot stay here for long. I will come back to find you at night." Gavin and Daenerys looked at each other, and Gavin nodded and said, "Okay, Maester Aemon, we will be careful and do everything as you say." Daenerys also said softly, "Great uncle, we are waiting for you." Maester Aemon nodded slightly, turned and hurried away. Night fell over the Black Castle, and the cold moonlight poured down on the ancient stone walls. On the walls, the only two torches flickered in the night wind, emitting a faint and dim light. A guard leaned against the wall. In this long and cold night, his eyelids became heavier, and his head drooped from time to time, looking drowsy. Suddenly, a slight flapping sound was heard in the silent night sky. Viserion's nimble figure flew silently over the Black Castle under the cover of night. Its red scales shone mysteriously in the moonlight and the glow of the torches. It hovered for a while, then quickly flew towards the room where Gavin and the others were, flew through the window, and landed in Daenerys' arms. Daenerys gently stroked its scales. At this time, Maester Aemon also squinted his eyes and tried to get closer, trying to see the dragon clearly. He reached out and gently touched Viserion's scales, his rough fingers feeling the hard and warm texture. Viseryon seemed to sense the same blood as Daenerys in Maester Aemon, and instead of resisting, he lowered his head slightly, as if to show his approval. Maester Aemon's eyes moistened, and he said with emotion, "I didn't expect that I would see a dragon of the Targaryen family in my lifetime. In the past, the dragon was the symbol and power of the Targaryen rule. Its reappearance today may be the guidance of fate. However, little Daenerys, even if you have a dragon, you must treat it with caution. This dragon can be a help to you, but it may also bring you disaster. In any case, I hope it can lead the Targaryen family back to glory." Daenerys hugged Viseryon tightly and looked at Maester Aemon with firm eyes, "Great-grandfather, I will take back the Iron Throne." Gavin, who was standing outside the door watching, listened to the conversations coming from inside the house and thought about the possible dangers of looking for the three-eyed raven. Chapter 94. Leaving. The next day, perhaps because of Gavin's assistance, when Gavin asked to see the Heart Tree, George Mormont, the commander-in-chief, personally led Gavin there. They passed through the deep tunnel under the Great Wall and arrived at Baesha village. In the center of the village stood the ancient fish beam tree. It was tall and pale, with the carved face on its trunk looming in the shadows. The sparse dark red leaves contrasted sharply with the pale branches covered with the remaining snow. The surroundings were a desolate scene, covered in snow, which shone coldly under the weak sunlight. The cold wind whistled past, rolling up the snow on the ground, making people unable to help but wrap their clothes tightly. The ground was frozen hard, and the dry grass trembled in the cold wind. The fish beam tree stands alone in this cold land, like a silent guardian, witnessing the changes of the White Tree village over the years. The snow around it seems to be thicker than elsewhere, perhaps because the falling snow has accumulated over a long period of time. The entire White Tree village is immersed in coldness and silence, with only the sound of the wind occasionally breaking the silence. Gavin and his companions slowly walked to the bottom of the weirwood. Mormont looked at Gavin and asked, "Sir Gavin, few southerners believe in the old gods. What about you?" Gavin smiled and replied, "I believe in the 7 gods, but I respect all gods. Now that I have come to the north, I naturally have to pay my respects to the weirwood of the old gods." As he spoke, Gavin gently placed his hand on the weirwood. Instantly, Gavin felt a strong magical power coming from his palm. He slowly closed his eyes, feeling the magical power flowing through his body, and with the help of the weirwood's perspective, his consciousness began to rise into the air. Looking down at the earth, the scenery on the ground became smaller and smaller. He could clearly feel countless fulcrums containing magical power, and each fulcrum was a weirwood. Soon, Gavin's sight travelled across the long distance and saw a particularly huge fish beam tree. Through the body of the fish beam tree, he saw Brindan rivers entangled in the tree roots. The other party also opened his eyes and looked at him through the long distance. After a moment, Gavin slowly took his hand away and took a deep breath, his eyes still showing the shock of what he had just seen. Mormont looked at Gavin from the side, his eyes full of curiosity and questions. Gavin calmed himself, turned to look at Mormont, and said with a smile, "Commander-in-Chief, please take me to see the wall." Taking the wooden elevator, Gavin finally climbed the 700-foot-high Great Wall. Gavin stood on the Great Wall and looked into the distance. In the distance was an endless vast landscape with mountains, forests, and plains spreading out before his eyes. The cold wind blew, lifting his cloak. Mormont said beside him, "Isn't it shocking, Sir Gavin?" Gavin nodded and responded, "Yes, it is indeed shocking." Mormont smiled and continued, "Yes, I felt the same way when I first came here and saw this scene. But I come here every day to inspect it, and now I am tired of it. I no longer feel the same shock as before." Then Mormont leaned his hands on the wall and said solemnly, "Recently, the activities of the wildlings in the north have become more frequent. I don't know why." After hearing this, Gavin wanted to mention the existence of the White Walkers, but he gave up thinking that the other party might not believe it. He then said, "There are also many prisoners in the Stone Steps Islands. I will send a ship to escort them to East Sea Watch. Then, Commander-in-Chief, you can send someone to receive them." Mormont bowed and said, "Thank you, Sir Gawain, for your support of the Night's Watch." Gavin nodded slightly without saying anything, just looking quietly at the scenery in the distance. The continuous mountains were covered with snow, like a silver quilt covering the sleeping earth. The sunlight sprinkled on it, refracting a dazzling light. The biting cold wind blew on his face, but he felt extremely refreshed at the moment, as if all his troubles were swallowed up by this vast world. Birds flew across the sky in the distance, adding a touch of vitality to the silent scene. Gavin took a deep breath of the cold and fresh air, enjoying this moment of tranquility and freedom. 3 days later, Gawain took Daenerys and Maester Aemon to bid farewell. Maester Aemon's eyes were moist, full of concern and reluctance for Daenerys. Gawain bowed to Mormont and Maester Aemon, then turned and slowly left. Lord Commander Mormont, who was standing by, seemed to have some feelings when he saw this scene. He looked at Maester Aemon with a hint of doubt in his eyes, but he didn't ask in the end. After Gavin took Daenerys away from the Black Castle, he released the scorching shadow and flew towards the three-eyed raven. On the back of the dragon, Gavin briefly explained the matter of the three-eyed raven to Daenerys. The blazing shadow spread its wings and flew over the majestic Great Wall. To the north of the Great Wall was a world covered in silver. The boundless white snow covered the earth with a layer of pure white clothes. The cold wind blew, raising the snow mist, which sparkled with a dreamy luster in the golden sunlight. The blazing shadow was extremely fast, like a golden lightning streaking across the sky. In less than a moment, Gavin saw the extremely huge fish beam tree. It stood tall in the woods, with a thick trunk reaching straight into the sky, and dark red leaves swaying slightly, as if telling an ancient secret. Gavin commanded Blazing Shadow to descend. Blazing Shadow uttered a clear cry and circled toward the fish beam tree. As the Blazing Shadow landed next to the huge weirwood, a short female child of the forest came out of the cave under the tree to greet them. Her skin was dark green with mysterious spiral patterns painted on it. Her big eyes shone with ember-like light, her pointed ears stood up, and her dark green hair was mixed with tiny branches and vines. Daenerys looked surprised when she saw her. Gavin saw this and explained, "They are the children of the forest." Daenerys said, "I've heard their stories before and thought they were just legends." Gavin smiled and patted Daenerys's hand. The child of the forest looked at Gavin and said, "The Green Seer is waiting for you. Please follow me." Gavin instructed Daenerys beside him, "Wait for me here, don't leave Jiaying." Daenerys nodded immediately. Then, Gavin followed the leaf into the cave under the tree roots. In the cave, the tree roots were tangled and intertwined, and in the dim light, the moss emitted a faint fluorescence. Finally, Gavin saw the three-eyed raven, Brynden Rivers, who was lying there entangled in branches and had long lost the ability to move. Brynden Rivers pointed at the sword beside him and said, "This is the Dark Sister. As for the 3 dragon eggs, they are currently in the hands of Varys in the Red Keep. You can wait, and the dragon eggs should be delivered to you." Chapter 95. Dark Sisters. After learning the whereabouts of the dragon eggs, Gavin immediately understood that these were the 3 dragon eggs that Daenerys would get in the future. No wonder he sent spies to keep an eye on Illyrio for so long without discovering anything. It turned out that Daenerys's dragon eggs were provided by Varys. Thinking of this, he asked doubtfully, "So once I marry Daenerys, the dragon egg may be delivered to her?" Brynden Rivers looked at Gavin deeply and said, "Fate is always fickle, but it will eventually return to its due ending. Except for you, I don't see anyone who can break fate." After hearing this, Gavin said, "So fate is changing? Will Daenerys get the 3 dragon eggs in the end?" Brynden Rivers, "I cannot see your future, or the future of the people whose fates you have changed." Gavin didn't say anything after hearing this. He stepped forward and picked up the Dark Sister on the ground. The Dark Sister is a Valyrian steel longsword belonging to the Targaryen family. The hilt of the sword is made of black steel, inlaid with fine pieces of obsidian, which glitters with a little light. The handle is wrapped with a worn black leather. Its blade is slender and the blade flashes with a cold light. It is so sharp that it seems to be able to easily cut through everything in the world. After carefully watching the Dark Sisters, Gavin put down his sword and asked the 3-eyed raven, "What will Robert Baratheon do to me when the news that I have a dragon reaches the Iron Throne?" Brynden Rivers responded, "He has no interest in you. He does not consider your dragons a threat to him. It is Jonaran who considers you a threat to the Iron Throne." Gavin then asked, "What if I marry Daenerys? What will she do?" Brynden Rivers shook his head and said, "I don't know. As for you, I can only see what has happened." Gavin couldn't help but smile after hearing this. It seemed that he was really special. It was a good thing that he could not be predicted by these mysterious guys. Gavin then nodded and said, "I don't believe in fate, but I will keep my promise. I will leave the north today, but if anyone threatens me in the future, I can only say sorry for what you call fate." After hearing this, Brynden Rivers nodded slightly and stopped talking. Gavin turned and walked out of the tree hole. Soon Gavin came outside. When Daenerys saw that Gavin had another sword on him, her face turned red with excitement. Gavin had told her before that the sword he came here to retrieve was the family sword of the Targaryen family, the Dark Sister. After Gavin handed the sword to the excited Daenerys, he smiled and said, "We'll see on the way. We'll ride the dragon back to the Stepstones. There's plenty of time on the way." Then Gavin took Daenerys onto Blazing's dragon's back. Blazing spread its wings, which were as wide as a huge sail, and flapped them violently. The powerful force stirred up a gust of wind, and the snow and dead grass on the ground were instantly swept into the air, forming a small vortex. As the wings flapped, the surrounding air seemed to be stirred, making a whistling sound. The huge body slowly rose into the air, casting a shadow covering a large area, making the ground, which was already bleak due to the cold, even darker. Every time its powerful wings flapped, it brought a strong airflow, causing the branches of nearby trees to shake violently and the leaves to fall one after another. Gawain and Daenerys rode on the broad and solid back of the blazing shadow, steering it towards the stone-bound islands at lightning speed, and soon crossed the wall. Flying so blatantly in the sky, the relevant news would inevitably reach the Iron Throne at an extremely fast speed. There is no doubt that the huge size of the blazing shadows and their high-profile flying behavior are a huge shock to the Iron Throne. Daenerys's undisguised whereabouts will also deeply irritate Robert. The Iron Throne will certainly have a deeper fear of Gavin, and subsequent actions against him may emerge in an endless stream. Gavin had anticipated this. He had already made plans to become king within the next 2 years. He only needed to wait until his fleet was completely replaced with sailing warships. After he had absolute control of the sea, Gavin would be completely invincible. At this moment, Gavin was thinking about what to do after returning to the Stone Islands. He wanted to see what kind of problems Jonaran would give him, so that he would have a way to deal with him. After a whole day of flying, dusk was approaching and the sky was dyed orange and red. Gavin and Daenerys had already flown over the neck on Blazing Shadow, and Blazing Shadow conveyed his tiredness to Gavin. Gavin understood what he meant and immediately commanded Jia Ying to fly towards the kneeling stack not far ahead. As the Blazing Shadow descended in height, the merchants and mercenaries on the road below heard the loud sound of the flapping wings and looked up. When they saw the huge blazing shadow in the sky, fear instantly filled their faces. Dragon! It's a dragon! Someone shouted in fear. People fled in all directions, goods fell over and luggage fell to the ground in panic. The blazing shadow roared and landed at the door of the kneeling inn, and Gavin jumped off the dragon's back with Daenerys. At this moment, Viceroy suddenly came out from Daenerys' arms, roaring with his fangs bared. Gavin saw this and gently tapped Viceroy's head, saying with a smile, "You are the one who has the easiest journey. Even the wind can't blow you away." The bustling crowd outside the inn scattered instantly, and the people inside the inn saw the dragon landing in front of the door, and they all rushed deeper into the house frantically. Gavin looked calm, holding Daenerys' hand, and strode into the inn. After seeing the dragon rider entering the store, the terrified proprietress Martha walked over trembling. As she approached, Viceroy, who was standing on Daenerys' shoulder, suddenly roared a warning at her. The frightened proprietress stopped immediately, her eyes filled with fear, her body trembling uncontrollably, and she didn't dare to get closer for a moment. Seeing this, Daenerys immediately tried to comfort Viceroy, while Gavin took out a few gold dragons, handed them to him and said with a smile, "I'm sorry to scare you, don't be afraid, this money is compensation for the delay in your business. Please prepare some food and a room for us. In addition, I want 5 sheep from your sheepfold behind and send them to the door to feed my dragon." After hearing this, the proprietress Martha stammered, "Sir, this dragon is too scary. I dare not feed the dragon." Her voice was trembling and she kept twisting the corners of her clothes with her hands. Gavin smiled and said, "You just need to drive the sheep to the door, and I will do the rest." Then he urged, "Go and get ready." Martha nodded timidly and hurried to get ready. Chapter 96. Tas Island. Gavin and Daenerys found a place to sit down. The people hiding in the corners of the inn secretly poked their heads out and looked back and forth at Gavin and Daenerys in the distance. They looked at Gavin and Daenerys' iconic silver hair and purple eyes, and began to whisper to each other. "Look, those eyes and hair are the characteristics of the Targaryen family. They are also riding dragons. The Targaryen family is back," a bearded merchant muttered in a low voice. "Hey, don't talk nonsense. The dragons of the Targaryen family have been destroyed for more than 100 years. They have long been extinct. How is that possible?" A drunk businessman retorted. "Why don't you go and see what that is at the door? You'd better wake up, or he might anger the Dragon King and harm us all." A skinny mercenary nearby threatened coldly. "Maybe they are here for revenge. Those who once betrayed the Targaryen family will be in trouble." An old man stroked his chin and thought. Gavin ignored the whispers beside him, and he couldn't hear clearly because he was far away. Instead, Daenerys listened carefully. Suddenly she asked Gavin, "Gavin, do the people of the Seven Kingdoms really welcome the Targaryens?" Gavin smiled and said, "It doesn't matter to them who is the king. They only care about their own lives and property, and will be swayed by public opinion and religion. So there is no such thing as welcoming. As long as the ruler's policies are good for them, they will welcome it." Daenerys asked, "How are you doing in the Stepstones, Gavin? Do your people love you?" After listening to this, Gavin pondered for a moment and said, "All those who benefit from me will definitely support me, and as for the others who are being coerced, there will be no opposition." After a while, Martha and the waiter brought up the food. The landlady, Martha, looked nervous and said timidly, "Sir, the room has been prepared for you and the sheep have been driven to the door. Do you have any other instructions?" After hearing this, Gavin smiled calmly and responded, "Thank you for your hard work. Go and do your own thing." After that, he stood up and slowly walked out of the inn, then threw the sheep to Jia Ying one by one. Along with the blazing dragon flames spewed out by Jia Ying, a strong and pungent aroma of barbecue instantly spread around the inn. Some brave and curious people couldn't help but stick their heads out to watch curiously. After all, witnessing the scene of a dragon eating with their own eyes is a novel sight that has never been heard of or seen before. Some passing soldiers also hurriedly left to inform their respective masters. At night, Gavin and Daenerys rested in the room. Outside the window, the watery moonlight poured on the quiet road, covering the earth with a layer of silver gauze. However, in just one night, the news of the Targaryen and the dragon's appearance spread across the land like a swift wind. With countless ravens flapping their wings, the news spread rapidly throughout the 7 kingdoms. The next day, Gavin and his friends got up early, packed up briefly, and set off again. As the dragon left, everyone in the inn breathed a sigh of relief. They continued their journeys and told the story of last night's miracle as a topic of bragging and spreading it. Gavin and his companions rode on Blazing Shadow and flew southeastward for a whole day. In stark contrast to the sparsely populated northern region, the Riverlands and Stormlands, the heartland of the kingdom, were densely populated and bustling. Countless people looked up in astonishment, staring at the blazing shadow flying past their heads, pointing at the sky and exclaiming in amazement. Travelers on the road stopped their hurried steps and looked up at the sky. Farmers working in the fields also looked up from the ridges involuntarily. Before they had time to put down the farm tools in their hands, everyone's eyes were deeply attracted by the majestic and domineering blazing shadow in the sky. For a moment, Jia Ying's huge body that covered the sky and the sun, and his majestic posture, were engraved in people's minds like a deep and shocking mark. At dusk, Gavin and his team had already flown over the Tass Strait, and the Tass Island ahead was vaguely visible in the hazy twilight. Gavin introduced Daenerys. "We are about to reach the Isle of Tarth, which is controlled by the Tarth family of Duskfall Hall. Let's rest on the island for a while before continuing on our journey. We will reach the Stepstones tomorrow morning." Daenerys responded, "Well, Gavin, I'll do as you say." Blazing Shadow is tired, too. A lighthouse for guiding ships stands on a coastal cliff on Tasman Island. A guard was standing guard at the top of the lighthouse, his eyes sometimes sweeping over the choppy sea, sometimes glancing absent-mindedly at the island. The board guard was waiting for the night to fall. After the lights on the top of the tower were lit, he could rest. At this moment, he subconsciously looked up at the sky. In the distance, he saw a huge dragon flying towards the island, its wings spread out almost covering half of the sky, and finally flew into the island. The guard's eyes suddenly widened and his mouth opened, but he was too shocked to make a sound. After a moment, he seemed to wake up from his stupor, turned around, and stumbled down the stairs of the lighthouse, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Dragon! The dragon is coming!" His voice became shrill and piercing with fear, and it echoed along the road leading to the castle. The guard ran as hard as he could for a long time and finally ran to a village. Without taking a breath, he rushed into the village, borrowed a horse, and then whipped the horse's buttocks hard and galloped towards the castle. His chest rose and fell violently, he gasped for breath, and sweat poured down his face, soaking his clothes. Along the way, the wind whistled in his ears, and he had only one thought in his mind, to inform Earl Selwyn of the dragon's appearance as soon as possible. The guards on duty on the city wall saw a figure riding a horse in the distance, and immediately blew the horn, and then shouted to the bottom, "The cavalry is back." At the sound of the horn, the castle gate was slowly opened. The guard rushed into the castle on horseback, panting. Before his horse could stop, he fell off, staggering and almost unable to stand. He gasped and kept shouting, "The dragon! The dragon is coming!" Soon, the breathless guard was brought before Lord Selwyn Tarth. Looking at the guards in front of him, Selwyn frowned and was about to ask a question when his daughter Brienne of Tarth also walked into the hall. She was tall, with a round, rough face covered with freckles, and a nose that had been broken so many times that it looked a little crooked. Selwyn ignored his daughter and looked at the guard calmly and said, "Don't panic. Tell me slowly what you saw." Chapter 97. Brienne. The guard supported his knees with his hands, gasping for breath, and reported to Earl Selwyn intermittently, "My lord. I was on duty at the lighthouse, and saw a huge dragon flying towards our Tas island, and then landing on the island." Brienne stood quietly by, listening attentively to the guard's story. After hearing this, Earl Selwyn waved his hand and said, "I understand. You can go down and rest first." The guard felt relieved and was taken away. Lord Selwyn was pacing back and forth in the hall with a frown on his face. Brienne, who was standing by, looked at her father's expression and couldn't help asking, "Father, have you guessed something? Is there really a dragon?" Earl Selwyn stopped and looked at his daughter, then slowly said, "If I'm guessing correctly, it should be the dragon of Gavin Belleris, the new overlord of the Stepstone Islands. There have been rumors in recent months that he has acquired a giant dragon, and it seems that the rumors are true. I just don't know why he came to our island of Tas. Brienne said, "Father, Tarth is very close to the stepstones. I think they are just passing through here." Lord Selwyn sighed, nodded, and said, "As a new dragon rider, I don't know what the Iron Throne thinks. He came to the island of Tarth but did not visit the castle. I guess he did so to avoid unnecessary trouble. Since he has not visited us, we will just pretend that we don't know." After hearing this, Brienne's eyes showed a thoughtful look. She had long heard of Gavin Bellerus's heroic deeds in conquering the Stepstones, expelling the brutal pirates, and vigorously expanding the territory. Whenever she heard these stories, her heart was filled with admiration, and she even wished she could experience such a glorious moment in person. However, this was the first time she had heard that the other party had a giant dragon. Gradually, the mystery of the dragon made her want to see it with her own eyes. In the evening, the afterglow of the setting sun faded slowly like a veil, and the sky gradually darkened. Gavin and his friends found a sheltered valley not far from the sea. Gavin quickly lit a huge bonfire and prepared to grill some freshly caught fish for dinner. The bonfire jumped and crackled happily, and the orange-red flames reflected their slightly tired but expectant faces. At the same time, Jia Ying, who had been extremely hungry, couldn't wait to rush to the sea alone to find food. Just as Gavin was concentrating on turning the grilled fish, a slight rustling noise suddenly came from the originally quiet grass. Gavin's nerves were instantly tense, and he reacted extremely quickly. He pulled out the dawn like lightning, and stared at the direction of the noise, his eyes full of vigilance and alertness. Daenerys on the side also immediately stood up and quickly hid behind Gavin with a nervous expression, while Viceroy kept making low calls towards the bushes, as if warning the newcomers. After a long while, a tall woman with a sword on her waist slowly walked out of the grass. She was covered in dust and her hair was a little messy. After Brienne walked out of the bushes, she quickly scanned the people present. Her eyes first stayed on Daenerys for a moment, then moved away. She looked at Viceroy and Gavin, who was holding Dawnbreaker and looking alert, with a little surprise, and was confused. According to rumors, Gavin's dragon was not so small. Brienne raised her head slightly, stared at Gavin and asked tentatively, "Excuse me, are you Sir Gavin?" Her voice was steady and powerful, with a hint of respect. Gavin looked at Brienne's tall figure, guessed something in his mind, put away Dawn, and said, "I am." "Aren't you going to introduce yourself?" Brienne took a deep breath and said, "My name is Brienne of Tarth. I heard about your conquest of the Stepstones, so I came to see you." Gavin raised his eyebrows, looked Brienne up and down, and said, "So you are the lady of the Tarth family. I wonder what brings you here." Brienne said sincerely, "I admire your bravery and want to see what a man who can do such a feat looks like. I also heard that you got a dragon, but I have a question in my mind. It is said that you have a golden dragon, but why did I see this little dragon today?" Gawain chuckled, glanced at Viceroy, and explained, "This is not my dragon, it belongs to Daenerys. My dragon went to the sea to find food. Is it the princess of the Targaryen family?" Hearing this, Brienne's face was solemn and she asked in a puzzled tone. At this time, Daenerys, who had been silent all the time, spoke, "I am Daenerys Targaryen Stormborn, Brienne of House Tarth. You seem to be embarrassed to hear of my existence. Are you planning to capture me and hand me over to the usurper?" Daenerys's words were loud and clear, containing majesty and power that could not be ignored, making the atmosphere around them suddenly tense and depressing. Brienne hurriedly shook her head when she heard that, her face full of sincerity and determination, "Your Highness, you misunderstood. Although the Tarth family is loyal to Baratheon, I came here not with any conspiracy, but out of admiration for Sir Gawain's heroic deeds and curiosity about the legend of dragons. Besides, I would never attack an unarmed little girl like you." Hearing this, a complex emotion flashed across the eyes of the unarmed Daenerys, and she slowly said, "Thank you for your attitude towards me, Lady Brienne. Compared to the usurper who keeps sending assassins to me, he is not even as good as a woman." Brienne frowned and said, "My lord, do you have any concrete evidence to support your accusation against the king? From what I have heard, he was an honorable warrior in the past. You cannot slander him out of hatred." At this moment, a huge shadow covering the sky and the sun instantly enveloped Brienne. She looked up involuntarily and saw a golden dragon landing behind Gavin. The dragon's powerful wings flapped violently, and the howling wind blew out the blazing bonfire. After having eaten its fill, Jia Ying happily nudged Gavin with its head affectionately, as if to say that it was ready to soar into the sky. Gavin gently stroked Blazing Shadow and said to Brienne, "Miss Brienne, I understand your position. Time will reveal the truth. Pay more attention to the news from Bravus. I think there will be news soon. As he said that, Gavin took Daenerys back on the dragon's back. Then, he said to Brienne, who was already stunned on the ground, "This is my dragon, Blazing Shadow, Brienne of Tarth. I look forward to seeing you again in the future." As soon as the words fell, Jia Ying raised his head and howled, making a roar that shook the world. Then, it spread its extremely wide wings, flapped them violently, and rushed into the sky with overwhelming force, and instantly disappeared into the vast sky. Chapter 98, Current Situation in the Territory. The bloody morning sun slowly rises from the horizon, illuminating the vast sea surface of Bloodstone Island. The morning sea breeze, mixed with the smell of sea salt, blows over the busy port. People at the port were busy loading and unloading cargo ships, craftsmen were busy repairing fishing nets, preparing fishing boats that were about to go out to sea, and some vendors were shouting to sell fresh seafood. Amidst the hustle and bustle, a roar suddenly came from the sky. People stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky in fear. They saw a mighty golden dragon, with its huge and strong wings spread out. Its golden scales shone brightly in the sunlight, like a god's chariot descending to the earth. Gavin rode on the dragon's back, his figure erect. Beside him, Daenerys's silver hair fluttered in the wind. The dragon let out a deep roar, as shocking as thunder, and the flocks of birds above the town flew away in all directions. People on the dock stopped what they were doing and looked up at the shocking scene. Some people's faces suddenly changed and they stepped back in fear, but most of them were unable to conceal their admiration and excitement. Gavin guided the dragon to slowly descend, aiming directly at the Lord's mansion in Bloodstone Town. The dragon's wings stirred up gusts of wind, raising dust on the streets of the town. The crowd of onlookers pushed and whispered, and the news of the Lord's return quickly spread throughout Bloodstone Town. The giant dragon finally landed heavily in the square in front of the city Lord's mansion, and the ground seemed to tremble. Gavin jumped off the dragon's back swiftly. He glanced at the onlookers, and seeing the surprise and awe on their faces, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Daenerys also got off the dragon's back, her white skirt fluttering in the wind, like a beautiful goddess standing on the side of a giant dragon. "Look, this is my territory," Gavin whispered to Daenerys. Then he turned and walked towards the gate of the city Lord's mansion, with the giant dragon slowly folding its wings and the shocked residents of Bloodstone Island behind him. In the evening, the sky gradually turned golden, and the afterglow gently sprinkled on the city Lord's mansion on Bloodstone Island, adding a bit of warmth and solemnity to it. This building, which usually stands tall and solemn, now looks even more brilliant under the light, as if it is about to witness the arrival of an important moment. Officials on the island, regardless of their positions, hurried over, bringing their own concerns and expectations, and gathered in the city Lord's mansion. Although the preparations for this banquet were a bit hasty, and even for various reasons, many governors of remote islands were unable to attend the scene, Gavin still decided to take this opportunity to announce a major news to his retainers and subjects: he had a fiancée. The atmosphere at the banquet was warm and cheerful. Gavin, dressed in gorgeous clothes and smiling, personally led Daenerys into the venue. Her appearance was like the brightest star in the night sky, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Following Gavin's formal introduction, officials came forward one after another and paid their respects to the future hostess with the most respectful attitude. Their attitude was sincere and warm, not only showing respect for Daenerys herself, but also highly approving of Gavin's decision. At this moment, Gavin deeply felt the importance and expectations of people for obtaining an heir, which was far beyond his previous imagination. As the night deepened, the candle light in the study flickered, covering this quiet space with a soft and mysterious veil. Under the dim light and shadow, the four walls seemed to be immersed in deep thoughts. As soon as the banquet ended, Boris, the governor of Bloodstone Island, hurried over with a serious look on his face. He stood upright in front of the desk and slowly explained the recent developments in the territory to Lord Gavin, who was sitting in a chair with a calm temperament. "My lord, during your absence, everything on Bloodstone Island has been running smoothly. A brand new sailing warship has been successfully delivered to Commander Hassan in Dragonflame Bay. In addition, the 2 sailing warships ordered from Essos have also arrived. At the same time, the 2 newly put into operation paper mills are running at full capacity, and the problem of paper supply has been alleviated." Boris's words revealed his pride and satisfaction with the development of the territory, but then his tone became more solemn. "There is another matter that I need to report to you." Minister of Finance Peter brought the order of the Royal Council. The Iron Throne decided to include the Stepstone Islands under the port tax collector system and strictly prohibit ships from the Slaver Bay from docking in accordance with the law. This move is obviously intended to curb the economic development of our territory and limit our ability to obtain unsullied warriors. Lord Gavin smiled faintly when he heard this. He took the parchment handed to him by Boris, scanned its contents with a sharp gaze, and then snorted, "The Iron Throne is quite wary of my possession of dragons. If the news of my marriage to Daenerys reaches King's Landing, I'm afraid the one sitting on the Iron Throne will be even more uneasy." After hearing this, Boris pondered for a moment and then said softly, "My lord, the officials in the territory and I sincerely hope that you can marry a suitable wife as soon as possible and give birth to an heir to consolidate your foundation. But forgive me for being frank, it is not a wise move for you to choose to marry the exiled princess of the Targaryen family at this moment. Although you can gain the right to claim the Iron Throne, Princess Daenerys is still young and cannot successfully give birth to an heir for you in a short period of time. During this period of time, we will not only face the suppression of the Iron Throne, but also deal with possible conflicts with forces such as Rhys. I am worried that we will fall into a dilemma of being attacked from all sides." After hearing this, Gavin sighed softly, rubbed his temples with his fingers, and said thoughtfully, "I have considered your concerns, but since you have made a choice, there is no reason to be afraid of trouble. By the way, has that Cobain arrived?" Boris responded immediately, "Yes, sir. Maester Coburn arrived half a month ago. He is indeed knowledgeable and has profound attainments in the field of architecture. I will temporarily place him in Dragonflame Bay to be responsible for the construction of the manor and the planning and implementation of defense facilities there." After hearing this, Gavin immediately ordered, "I decided to go to Dragonflame Bay to take a look. At the same time, notify Hassan to return as soon as possible, and you should come with him. I will have new arrangements by then." After hearing this, Boris immediately stood up and responded respectfully, "Yes, sir. I will arrange it immediately." After Boris left, Daenerys came out of another room, with mixed emotions, and walked to Gavin. Gavin could tell at a glance that she had just listened to the conversation between him and Boris, so he comforted her gently, "Don't mind what Boris said. He is a very rational person, and he is a native islander. Everything is for the benefit of the Stepstone Islands. We should also accept the suggestions of our subordinates, even if sometimes their opinions are not so pleasant to hear." Chapter 99. Harvest of Coban. Daenerys nodded and said, "I can understand. He has a point. My presence may indeed cause you trouble." Gavin stroked Daenerys's silver hair and said softly, "Since I have chosen you, I am not afraid of the troubles of the Iron Throne. Moreover, even without you, the existence of Blazing Shadow is enough to make the Iron Throne take action." Daenerys asked curiously, "Gavin, what about Commander Hassan?" Gavin smiled and explained, "Hassan's ability is mediocre, and he can't compare with Boris, who is excellent in government affairs. But Hassan's loyalty is unquestionable, so I handed the fleet over to him." Daenerys listened and nodded to show her understanding. Gavin continued, "We will live in Dragonflame Bay in the future. Although it is not as prosperous as Bloodstone Island in terms of commerce, there is a natural dragon's lair in Dragonflame Bay, which is easy to defend but difficult to attack. Our roots are dragons, so it is better to live closer to dragons. There are 11 dragon eggs in the dragon's lair. As long as we hatch them all threats will no longer be a problem." Daenerys smiled slightly and said expectantly, "I really want to see what the dragon's lair looks like soon." After hearing this, Gavin said, "Let's go there tomorrow. I also want to see how the construction there is going." The next morning, before the sky over Bloodstone Town was fully light, Gavin and Daenerys were ready to set off. The huge figure of Jia Ying in the square attracted attention, with its dragon wings spread out, casting a shadow. Gavin took Daenerys onto the dragon's back. With a low roar, Blazing Shadow suddenly took off, instantly breaking through the quiet morning light. Although she had flown in the sky countless times, Daenerys still felt new and excited. The light of the morning sun shone on her and Gaon, and their figures merged with the giant wings of the Blazing Shadow, as if they were the gods descending from the legend. Soon after, they arrived at Dragonflame Bay. Looking down, the scenery of Dragonflame Bay was breathtaking. Below the steep cliffs, the waves rolled and crashed, making a sound like raging waves. Jia Ying flew directly into the huge naturally formed cave in the dragon's lair. The cave entrance was wide and the towering stone walls were covered with uneven rock patterns. Deep in the cave, you can see dragon eggs placed on hot dragon crystals, with many gentle flames scattered around them. Soon they arrived at the gate of the manor connected to the dragon's lair, and several servants immediately came to greet them. Daenerys looked around, marveling at the beauty and grandeur of the place. The main building of the manor has been basically completed. The high walls and towers made of white stone, combined with the rounded corners of the defense wall, make the manor look both solemn and solid. The garden is full of different kinds of plants. Although the newly planted flowers and trees still look immature, the future splendor of the garden can already be seen. Gavin and Daenerys, led by servants, toured the entire estate. Daenerys excitedly shared her joy with Gavin, and Gavin always smiled and listened to her every word. After finishing the inspection, they walked towards a secluded study. Gavin stopped at the door and said with a smile, "Daenerys, go and rest first. I have something to talk to Qyburn about." Daenerys nodded and responded softly, "Okay, Gavin." Gavin walked into the study, where Maester Qyburn was waiting. Qyburn looked a little older, but his eyes were still sharp, and he exuded an air of wisdom and prudence. After Gavin sat down, Qyburn immediately stood up and saluted, "Lord Gavin, long time no see." Gavin nodded and motioned for Qyburn to sit down. He said directly, "Master Qyburn, I have seen the construction of the manor. You have done a good job. It has been 3 years since we parted in the citadel. I looked for you after returning to Old Town, but you had already left by then." Qyburn looked at Gavin with a complicated expression. This bachelor's assistant who used to study with him had achieved such great success in a short period of time. The change of identity made it difficult for him to adapt to it. When he first heard the news about Gavin, Qyburn was a little bit unconvinced. However, thinking of the power and status that Gavin could give him at this time, he still complimented him, "Sir, thank you for your appreciation and search for me all the time. I will do my best to serve you." Gavin raised his lips slightly and said bluntly, "Master Qyburn, we have had experience together before, and I understand your abilities and knowledge. I hope you can make full use of these to serve me. At the same time, I will support your exploration of the mystery. Can you tell me what happened in the citadel?" Hearing this, Qyburn looked a little embarrassed and said slowly, "In fact, the matter is not complicated. At that time, I used the idea you provided to try to create a blood witch puppet. The first experiment failed, but before I could deal with the body, I happened to meet a dying patient. I could only hide the body, but it was discovered by the citadel. They only found the body and thought that I was desecrating the dead and conducting inhumane research, so they deprived me of my bachelor's chain. You know everything that happened afterwards, sir." As soon as Qyburn finished speaking, he asked excitedly, "Sir, I saw the blood dragon guards in your dragon cave." But Gavin didn't let him continue. He interrupted him and said, "The reason why I succeeded is because my body has magic power. I didn't use any tricks." Then he said, "In my territory, I can allow you to study these mysterious knowledge, but all experiments need my approval, and the subjects of the experiments can only be the death row prisoners I provide to you." Upon hearing this, Qyburn immediately promised, "Thank you for your support, sir. I will never violate your request, please rest assured." Gavin pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "Due to paper issues, the citadel did not send me a scholar. Currently, the crow's nest in the territory has not been built yet. Next, you will be responsible for raising ravens and training some suitable candidates to be deployed on various islands. In addition, I also want you to take on intelligence work, especially to pay close attention to news outside the Stone Steps Islands." Qyburn nodded, thought carefully and said, "Don't worry, sir. I know what to do. In addition, I have seen your 3-bow crossbow, and I think it can be improved." Gavin was very surprised after hearing this, and then he remembered that the scorpion crossbow that shot the dragon in the drama in his previous life was modified by Qyburn. He immediately said, "Then improve it as soon as possible, and all the craftsmen at the shipyard will be under your command." Qyburn bowed and said, "Sir, I will make arrangements now. Please allow me to take my leave first." After that, he hurried away, his heart full of motivation and expectations for the future. Gavin looked at Qyburn's departing back with a deep gaze. Although many of Qyburn's actions were unacceptable to the world, his abilities were indeed outstanding. He just needed to be cautious when using him. Chapter 100. New Crossbow. 2 months later. In the deep water port of Longian Bay, the sun shines on the sparkling sea, casting a golden glow. Gavin stared intently at the 3-bow crossbow that had been modified by Qyburn, looking forward to its performance. "Ready." Koban gave the order, and the operator skillfully pulled the loaded crossbow. The sunlight flickered on the crossbow, as if foreshadowing the shocking moment to come. Fire! Following Koban's command, a loud noise echoed in the port, and the crossbow arrow flew out like lightning. It was as if a hole had been opened in the air, and the crossbow arrow tore through the sky at an incredible speed, bringing up a gust of wind. I saw a black shadow instantly penetrate the side of a ship in the distance. The huge kinetic energy instantly burst the wooden board of the side and formed a hole, and wood chips flew like rain. The crossbow arrow was unstoppable, and it went through the other side of the side, stirring up high water splashes on the sea surface. The power was unparalleled. Koban could not hide his excitement. "Sir, after this improvement, the range and power of this crossbow have increased by nearly half." Hassan on the side watched with his eyes shining, and said excitedly, "Sir, in my opinion, we should immediately start replacing the crossbows on all warships." His words were full of anticipation and excitement, as if he had already seen the victory brought by the new crossbows in future battles. Gavin asked Koban, "How long does it take to make a new ballista?" Koban immediately explained, "Because we are modifying the original ones, the replacement speed is very fast. Now we have enough manpower, and it will only take 2 months to replace all the crossbows in the fleet." Gavin nodded with satisfaction, and immediately instructed Hassan, "Immediately arrange for the fleet's ships to take turns to Dragonflame Bay to replace the crossbows." Hassan immediately obeyed, "Yes, sir." Afterwards, Gavin announced in public, "From today on, Koban is appointed to be in charge of intelligence work and serve as the chief scholar of the Stone Steps Islands." Koban bowed deeply and said, "Thank you for your trust, sir. I will do my best to live up to your expectations." At night, the manor was slowly shrouded in darkness, as if it was sleeping in a peaceful dream. In that quiet study, the light is soft and warm, and the surrounding bookshelves are filled with heavy books. Gavin, Boris, Koban, and Hassan sat around an antique desk. Gavin stood up, took out a bottle of summer red from the wine cabinet beside him, and slowly poured it into everyone's glass. The wine rippled in the glass, exuding a mellow aroma. With the sound of the wine hitting the glass, Gavin finally said slowly, "I plan to launch an attack on Reese in the near future. Do you have any suggestions?" His voice was low, and his eyes swept across everyone's faces one by one. The Lys envoy that Gavin had sent a warship to intercept had been captured and brought back to the Stepstones half a month ago. After interrogation, the other party admitted that it was Governor Lys who knew Gavin had a dragon and was worried about Gavin's threat, so he had no choice but to choose the assassination method. The Lys envoy was ordered by the governor to go to Bravus to hire the faceless man. When he left Lys, Governor Lys even planned to remake a batch of dragon hunting crossbows that had been abandoned for 100 years. Gavin plans to take the initiative while Reese is still unaware and use the information gap to eliminate the threat in advance. The study fell into a brief silence. Only the dim light cast swaying shadows on the four people's faces, as if foreshadowing the coming storm. Boris was the first to break the silence and said, "Those tax officials sent by the Iron Throne have been pestering us recently. They have always wanted to see you, my lord, but I have rejected them all for various reasons. Ever since the news of your plan to marry Princess Daenerys came out, these people have come to me more and more frequently, and the tax control and ship inspections in the territory have become more stringent. Although the main source of income in the territory is our goods, we have been expanding our fleet and building new projects, and there is basically not much deposit left in the territory. I feel that if we go to war with Reese now, we must do it quickly." His face was gloomy, and his tone was filled with deep worry. After listening to this, Gavin nodded slightly without any response, and then turned his gaze to the other two. Hassan also spoke up, "Among the 3 kingdoms of daughters, only Lys is an island nation. In terms of maritime strength, Lys is the strongest, followed by Tyrosh, and Mir is the weakest. Since you conquered the Stepstones, our relationship with Lys has been the worst, and the two sides have often confronted each other. The number of their warships is comparable to ours, and the San family they support has 40 warships stationed in Lys. However, in terms of ship performance, the enemy's sailing warships are less than half of ours, and they also have the newly designed ballista by Maester Qyburn. Once the war starts, I think we have a great advantage at sea, but we need to consider the threats from Tyrosh and Mir." Qyburn immediately interrupted and said, "The alliance of the 3 daughters is not that close. The alliance is mainly to prevent Volantis from seizing the disputed lands. Tyrosh and Mir may not participate in our war to Lys, but of course we cannot rule out their participation. My lord, we can send envoys to Volantis. As long as they show signs of seizing the disputed lands, we can contain Tyrosh and Mir. Hearing Coben's suggestion, Gavin narrowed his eyes slightly and responded, "How sure are you that Volantis will take action?" Coben thought for a moment and said, "Your Excellency, the 3 governors of Volantis are Malakar Meja of the Tiger Party and Nisaso Waisama and Afaz Panimayan of the Elephant Party. The Tiger Party is the war party and has always been eager to seize the disputed land. We only need to convince one of the 2 Elephant Party members to achieve our goal. If we only let Volantis take an offensive posture and do not participate in the war, I think we have a good chance of success." After hearing this, Boris also agreed, "My lord, I think Maester Coben's suggestion is very good. Whether Volantis agrees or not, we must send envoys in a swaggering manner. When Tyrosh and Mir learn of this, they will definitely be on guard against Volantis. This can effectively divert their attention." Gavin nodded and said to Qyburn, "Then do it. I'll leave it to you to send the envoy to Volantis. Also, how is the situation at the Iron Throne? Has the news been delivered?" After hearing this, Coben immediately replied, "According to your instructions, the message has been delivered to those people. There is no response yet. I think they need to confirm the authenticity of the message, so they dare not act rashly for the time being." Gavin smiled and said, "I'm afraid King's Landing will be in chaos soon. They won't be able to take care of us for a while. We can take this opportunity to get rid of Reese.